Is it time?
It is time for us to do what we have been doing, and that time is every day.
We'll know in a very short period of time, but it looks like it could be something that will be not good. Believe me, not good.
I see issue with that. And again, hey.
You're not going to be able to insult your way to the presidency. That's not going to happen.
I don't know who created Pokemon Go, but I'm trying to figure out how we get them to have Pokemon go to the polls.
I'm Ted Cruz, and my pronoun is kiss my ass.
So when you think about it, there is great significance to the passage of time in terms of what we need to do to lay these wires, what we need to do to create these jobs.
America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was going to put him.
Not good. Believe me, not good.
Hello, dissidents. Welcome, one and all, to a Tuesday matinee edition of the Do Dissidents podcast. Keaton Weiss here with Russell Dibular, of course.
Hello.
How's everybody doing today on this very, very hot, sweaty afternoon in New York? It is getting really, really warm out there. Very hot out there. Dog days of summer. And I think it's even hotter in St. Louis, where we are going to be at the end of next week, starting end of next week.
Oh, man. Summer in the Midwest. Oof.
It's gonna be something. It's gonna be a time. But the reason I bring that up at the top of the show is because we are going to admit our two guests for the afternoon to talk about the Uhuru 3 and the Uhuru case a little bit. Our documentary is going to transcend the particulars of the case. We'll deal with the case a little bit. We're going there really to tell the history of the African People's Socialist Party and to highlight the community work that they do despite the government crackdown on them, which seems to be 24/7. But the case will be a component in the film, of course, since that's an important part of their story, and we are going to focus on that today because there are some developments that we want to go over. So I'm going to bring in our two guests here. Attorney Leonard Goodman is a distinguished criminal law attorney based in Chicago who's won high-profile and precedent-setting cases, including in the U.S. Supreme Court and the Illinois Supreme Court. He is a published columnist, covering legal and social justice topics and teaches federal criminal law at DePaul University. Leonard, good to see you. Thanks for joining.
Good afternoon, Keaton and Russell. Thanks for having us.
Of course.
Thanks for coming on, Leonard.
Of course. And Penny Hess is the chairwoman of the African People's Solidarity Committee, the solidarity component of the African People's Socialist Party, organizing the movement for white solidarity with Black power and reparations under the leadership of Chairman Omali Yeshitela. She is author of Overturning the Culture of Violence that chronicles the creation of white wealth at the expense of slavery, genocide, and land theft of African and indigenous people. Penny Hess is here as well. Penny, great to see you.
Yes, I want to say hello and Uhuru. I really appreciate you, Keaton and Russell, and just want to say salute to amazing attorney Leonard Goodman. Such an honor to be with you today.
Awesome. Well, you are live from the Uhuru House, as I understand.
I'm actually from the Uhuru Solidarity Center.
The Solidarity Center, okay. Yeah,
yes,
we hope to visit both. Well, we will be visiting both when we get there
so exciting.
in a couple of weeks. Yeah, it's going to be great. We are really looking forward to it. When we first interviewed the chairman, had to be almost 2 years ago by now, he said, every time I do an interview, I invite people to St. Louis to come and see what we do. And that planted the seed in my mind, well, why don't we do it? And so in a week and a half, thanks in large part, in fact, thanks solely to the funds that we raise from our beloved audience, we will be going out there and doing just that. So we're really looking forward to it. That'll be awesome. And great to have you guys here today. So, Lenny, my first question is for you. If you could just briefly recap the case for people who are not familiar with the government's case against Uhuru 3, this sort of bizarre sort of mixed verdict where on the one hand they were acquitted of being Russian agents but convicted of conspiring to be Russian agents even though they weren't, and the sentencing, just to give us some backstory.
Yeah, well, this case really, it strikes at the core of the First Amendment. There were U.S. citizens that were being prosecuted for political speech criticizing U.S. foreign policy. So that is really the core value of the First Amendment is political speech. And the case never should have gone to trial. The judge ended up agreeing that this was all political speech, but he said, well, the government says you're speaking on behalf of Russia. And so that takes it out of the First Amendment. There is no case law precedent for that. So this would be a brand new exception to the First Amendment, that if the government says you're speaking for Russia, then it's not protected speech. And on that theory, the case went to trial. As you correctly said, the jury found that they were not agents of Russia because all of the government witnesses, which were all FBI agents, there were no actual witnesses that came and pointed a finger at these defendants and said that they're agents. But it was a paper case. They had records of emails and they had all of the computers from the center. They seized all their files, so they had all the internal conversations for about 5-6 years, and their case was that they were speaking. They speak directly to their audience because they have their own newspaper, their own radio station, and that they were speaking their speech aligned with Russia, and that the chairman had taken a trip to Russia in 2015. And participated in a conference there. So the government's theory is, well, if your speech aligns with Russia, you must be agents of Russia. You must be speaking on behalf of that government, which was complete bullshit. As what came out at trial, and all the FBI agents admitted, these people have had the same views for 20, 30, 40 years. They're anti-imperialist. They are against NATO expansion. And really the problem was that they were out there in February of 2022 contradicting the U.S. narrative about the war in Ukraine and saying, no, this was provoked. As we've been saying, as the chairman had been saying since at least 2014, there was a coup in 2014 that provoked the war, where the U.S. was involved with removing the democratically elected president of Ukraine, NATO expansion up to Russia's border, arming Ukraine. And so that was forbidden. You weren't allowed to say that, and you weren't allowed to say it directly to your supporters. And I would say the other thing that's kind of important about this case is that they didn't have to go through Google. They talked directly to their supporters, which apparently is a threat to the U.S. government because they have their own newspaper and their own radio station. And they have a pretty good following in the Black community. And I think the Biden administration thought those people shouldn't be hearing these types of views. So they were out there in February of 2022, contradicting the U.S. narrative. And then in July, they were raided. And then in April, they were arrested and charged with federal crimes. So federal criminal prosecution for political speech. Yes, the case went to trial. The jury, there was no question they were not under the direction and control of Russia. They've been saying the same thing before they ever went to Russia. But they threw in this conspiracy charge, which was completely incomprehensible. 3 pages of jury instructions to describe this conspiracy. Now, conspiracy is kind of a bullshit charge anyway in federal court. The feds always like to throw in a conspiracy charge. Mm-hmm. So they wrap, the typical case is they'll sweep up a bunch of gang members, or not gang members, but people from public housing, and charge them with conspiracy to sell drugs, which allows them to sort of collect all the drugs and say that you're responsible for what everyone else is doing in this public housing unit. I've handled so many of those cases. So conspiracy charge, I think jurors don't really understand it. It makes a little bit of sense if I'm conspiring with you to commit fraud or to sell drugs. But in this case, it made no sense at all, because the allegation was that they were conspiring with this Russian national to be under his direction and control. So I don't know how the jury was supposed to process that information. The government told them in closing argument that all we had to prove was a partnership with this Russian national, and that's enough to convict on the conspiracy charge, which was not correct, but that's what the jury heard. And they did convict on the conspiracy charge. The case went to sentencing. I think the government was asking for 3 years for Penny and 4 years for the chairman. The judge said, I'm not sending these people to prison for this. And they're all on probation, but the case is on appeal. It's a really important precedent. You can't allow a prosecution to go forward where you're prosecuting American citizens for political speech criticizing their government. And that's what this case is. So we're very hopeful the 11th Circuit will reverse.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing. There you go, Penny. Looks like you're back. And this is the next question.
I hope so. I'm sorry, my internet's going in and out. Really.
Oh, that's okay. We will.
Yeah,
I
didn't know you were one of the people charged.
Yeah, Penny is a co-defendant. Absolutely. Yep.
Penny is my client.
There you go. So, I just wanted to reinforce one thing, Leonard, that you said, and Penny, this would be a good question for you as a, veteran activist, veteran peace activist, and anti-war activist. Leonard said in his answer, I'm not sure if you heard it because your internet kind of cut out there, but he talked about how, back in 2014, the African People's Socialist Party was making the point that this coup in Ukraine was a provocation to Russia, and that your stance all along was that this war was provoked. And it just, now that we're looking at public opinion turn against Israel vis-a-vis the Gaza genocide, isn't it kind of crazy? I've made this point on the show many times that the peace activists are always demonized when a war starts. And then a few years later, everyone's on that page. Right, whether it's Ukraine, whether it's Israel, Gaza, whether it was the Iraq war, the Afghanistan war, right? Whenever people speak out against the war at its early stages, they're either, sympathizing with the enemy or undermining America or this and that. They smear them all kinds of ways. And then a couple years later, everybody seems to be on the page. Oh, actually, they were right. And now majority opinion is against funding the war in Ukraine. I don't know if Penny's, there we go.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Boom.
Sorry, I don't know why today I'm having horrible internet situation here. Yes, so you were saying that that basically when a struggle is going on and the people are raising it, they're demonized for raising a question against a particular war or even other situations, and now then afterwards it's okay, and they sum it up 10 years later or something that it's all right. And I think that I know there is a change even in how the war is seen by this present administration, which is one of the things that has to be raised in our case, because it's a different perception of that war now. So, but yet I think that it also shows that the major reason for this attack was more of a continuation of the right of the Black community, or as we say, the African community, to fight for what Chairman Omali Yeshitela calls the anti-colonial free speech, that the free speech has to go along and include the ability of oppressed people to voice their right for freedom, self-determination, and independence.
Now, what is it that you think? Because one of the things that's so fascinating about the Uhurus and about Yeshitela, you hear the kind of moral stance that Uhuru has, and it's really like an echo from another time, because the FBI broke up all the groups that had this point of view. What is it that they find so threatening about this kind of message, and how has Uhuru uniquely survived this long?
Wow, what a great question. I would just say that, one of the things is that Chairman Omali Yeshitela, under whose leadership I work and organized, and Jesse Neville also, had summed it up that the Black liberation movement of the 1960s in particular was something that shook, as he says, shook this system to its very foundations. Right. Because if we understand that this country and system is built on slavery, I mean, that's undeniable historical truth. And it's built on, U.S. war against oppressed peoples around the world, in particular for the African community or Black community inside the U.S. to say, no, we are not fighting against racism, as the movement says. We're fighting against colonialism, and we're fighting for political and economic power in the hands of the African community, which is very different than just fighting ideas in white people's heads.
We had, when we were on Jimmy's show, we had on a guy who has a channel. His name's Greg Foreman. He has a channel. It's literally called The Black Conservative. Mm-hmm. And I showed him a clip of Yeshitela because part of the result of that destruction of those Black voices is the people you are most likely, and really the only people you're going to see in the public square who are Black, who are going to speak against government dependency and what it does to the community, are conservatives. So I showed him Yeshitela speaking against the Democratic Party. And he said afterwards he was speechless. He said, "You just blew my mind." He had no idea that anything like that existed. They took those concepts and they allowed them to be presented in a very libertarian, right-wing way. And that's the only place you hear it. So now ideas like that are coded as right-wing insofar as they're allowed to be aired at all.
Well, I think that, I don't know, sorry, but I just think that, Chairman Omali Yeshitela stated that this case in particular exposes and brings about support, has brought about a major support across political lines, across the political spectrum. And I think that, it redefines that, because if some of the supporters of Hands Off Uhuru are from what you would call, people call the right wing, but they're saying that they stand with the right of the Black community, the African community, to self-determination and to be able to say their own words, and they stand firmly with that. So it redefines the political life as we know it, speaking, in this country. I would just also say that what the chairman has defined as the white left has been very, very obstructionist to the right of the Black community to self-determination. And so...
Well, see, now that's an argument you would usually today only hear from like Herman Cain. Right? No, really. Those are the only people you would hear say that the Democratic Party is actually wants to weaken the Black community. And then white liberals, as soon as they hear that, it codes conservative to them and they write it off.
Exactly. It's a redefinition of the conversation, Penny, as you said, because people have in their head that self-determination equals capitalism and that dependency equals socialism. People don't see the connection between socialism and self-determination, which, like I said,
okay,
one of the
you just
reasons
froze
why
for me.
Sorry. Just for the audience, that is one of the things that really draws us to the story. For example, Uhuru has a bakery that they're building. They're also developing housing for people who just got out of jail. So while they are getting back on their feet after getting out of jail, they get to live in the housing and they get an internship at the bakery, right? So it's this sort of self-sustaining economic system that is socialist in nature, because it is about everybody pooling their resources and working for the betterment of each other. And that is completely consistent with socialism. That's not unique to capitalism. In fact, under capitalism, you would never have such a thing. Under capitalism, you'd get juice for the housing and you'd get no internship and no leg up in the job market anywhere. So yeah, you can build a self-sustaining system based on principles of anti-colonialism and socialism. That's what makes the story so not just worth telling, but so urgent, I think, in this moment. And it's also a story of survival in a time of genocide, which I think is very important, because it really is a story of survival. You guys are survivors. So Lenny, I just want to go back to you for a moment. Can you explain a little bit more in detail the appeal and how this will be such a precedent-setting case should that verdict, that second conspiracy verdict, be overturned?
Well, there's several issues for the appeal, but I think the most important one is that this case never should have gone to trial, because you can't just allow the government to say, these people that are criticizing us, we're going to put them in prison, or we're going to try to put them in prison, and use the federal courts to prosecute them, the federal justice system to prosecute them for their speech criticizing us. But we're not doing it. It has nothing to do with the First Amendment. It's only because they're speaking for Russia. And as long as they can make that allegation, then the case can go to trial. And that's a warning to activists everywhere that you better watch what you say, because if your speech aligns with some nation that we really don't like. Now, of course, it's complete bullshit that if you can't, first of all, they weren't speaking for Russia, and we showed that at trial and the jury agreed with that. But even if they were, it's complete bullshit that if you give a political speech and it's because someone from a foreign country told you to do it or asked you to do it, that's not protected speech. Of course it is, because we know there's people speaking for the state of Israel
well, yes,
all the time, and that's
yes,
perfectly fine. I mean, if Penny and O'Malley were speaking for Ukraine, there would have been no problem. The problem was they were speaking for a country that they don't like, and they really were coming from the left. They were to the left of the Democratic Party, and they were speaking to people that the Democratic Party, I think, believed should be their regular constituents. And they were telling them a different message, and a dangerous message. And they have a fairly large following, and they have a history, and they have a lot of trust in the community. So the government wanted to destroy that, and I don't believe that they were successful. And I'm hoping that we'll win this appeal. Now, there are other issues in the appeal, because there were some trial problems. There was the way the jury was misled about the conspiracy charge. There were some other trial errors that are also raised in the appeal, but hopefully the appellate court won't have to deal with those, because they'll agree with the principle that you can't prosecute Americans for you can't prosecute political activists for criticizing the government. It's just un-American. It violates the First Amendment. That's what's great about this country, is the First Amendment to the Constitution. A lot of European countries don't have that. And we're seeing what problems that cause for a lot of the European countries when they don't have a First Amendment. We need to keep ours.
Of course, yeah. And this is kind of a follow-up to what Penny said a few minutes ago about how the posturing so far, unfortunately, it's only posturing, and even that's been touch and go, of this administration has been different from the posturing of the Biden administration vis-a-vis Russia, Ukraine. But it has been different, noticeably, even though we still haven't gotten an end to that war yet that we were promised within 24 hours of Trump taking office. But I'm curious, do you think that Trump's DOJ would have brought this case? We know Biden's did. Do you think Trump's would have? I think that's an interesting question. I would like to get both of your opinions on that.
I think they would.
You think they would have?
I think they could have. I mean, of course, I do think that it is important and striking that it did come from the Biden administration.
Right.
But I think that we had indication that this comes from very high up. And, you know, I can't really say that, because I do think that the historical attack on the Black liberation movement, or the African liberation movement in
Right.
this country, is bipartisan. It is it is across the board, and it is many generations old, because you can go back to the case of Marcus Garvey, who was an African liberation leader of the 1920s, who was also framed up with the help of the white Communist Party and everything else. And what he was calling for, his slogan was Africa for Africans at home and abroad. And he built institutions in Harlem and other places throughout the United States that built an economic infrastructure for the Black community. And he was put in prison and died shortly after.
Well, they charged him with bootlegging, right?
Well, that was
bootlegging,
one of the things, but they charged him with mail fraud, for one thing, and using the same kind of trying to find something to charge him with, and he was convicted. So, and it was a very similar thing, and so he fought for economic development in the community and made it real, and he had 11 million members around the world. And what Chairman Omali Yeshitela represents and the Uhuru movement is really a continuation of that strain of the African liberation movement that's saying we want power, we want liberation, we want self-determination. And I do think that is something that a lot of white people can support, again, from across the political spectrum. And of course, I am the chair of the African People's Solidarity Committee, the organization of white people under the leadership of Chairman Omali Yeshitela. So one of the things, obviously, as Leonard has said, has been put out quite a bit, is they wanted to crush white support for the Uhuru movement. And that's why they picked Jesse and myself, along with the chairman, to try to get us. But actually, generally speaking, overall, this attack has opened up, as as I said before, an incredible amount of support from every sector of the political spectrum. And we've certainly, even the Uhuru Solidarity movement, it's grown. People respect that, they know where, as Chairman says, they know where to go. They know which organization to pick, because this is the one the U.S. government attacked.
Yeah, that's a really interesting answer. Because, when it comes to turning white people against the African People's Socialist Party, who were the most susceptible to anti-Russia narratives, it was the virtue signaling white liberals, right? They were the most primed to just reflexively hate anything that was associated with Russia. Go ahead, Lynn.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is just, I think what's dangerous, or what the government sees as dangerous about the Uhuru message, and I could see a Republican administration or a Trump administration prosecuting because of pressure. There was so much money to be made from NATO expansion. There was so much money to be made from these endless wars that just go on and on and on. And I think groups that are able to get support for a different type of foreign policy and have a real constituency and have a real trust are a threat to that war profiteering and the weapon sales. So that's the only thing I would add.
Okay. Russ, do you have anything else before we wrap on these guys?
Yeah, just in keeping with what we're talking about, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that from a legal perspective. This is in keeping with a long history of going after Black radical left groups in particular. The Weather Underground, most of those guys, they got a pass. They all walked free. Bill Ayers, Bernadine Dorn, they all walked free. They didn't do that with the Black Panthers. With the Weather Underground, they crossed the T's, dotted the I's. Oh yeah, well they did black bag jobs, so we got to let them go. You can't use evidence. they didn't use black bag jobs on all of these black radical groups, but none of them got a pass. So is this really in keeping with that? It seems like different rules apply. Maybe they assume that with white radical groups, they're just going to at worst be sheepdogs for the Democrats, like the DSA. Why do you think that is, even now, that they would single out a group like this?
It's a good question. I can't really answer that. I mean, you can look at who's in federal prison. You know, it's mostly black and brown people, and I think that surprises a lot of people. You know, you think that the federal government, because they pick and choose their cases. It's not like state court where there's an arrest and if the file goes to a prosecutor and they prosecute. The feds decide who they want to go after, and they decide to go after mostly black and brown people, mostly very low level people. You know, look at the banking, look at the mortgage crisis. No bankers were prosecuted, but lots of peons who filled out loan applications were prosecuted for mortgage fraud. A lot of black and brown people. So
do you think that's partly that they assume they're not going to have the political connections or financial resources to fight them off?
Absolutely. It's low hanging fruit.
Right.
And they have to prosecute someone, and they can't prosecute their donors for the most part, with very few exceptions. So, you know, it falls on people with very little political clout. They don't have lobbyists. So that's.
I also think it's more politically permissible to smack around black and brown people that way, right? Because they get the white people afraid of the black people, and then the white people say, well, thanks for protecting us from those dangerous black people. That's happens through today. Here, I'll give you guys a sneak preview. We're going to cover this as a more thorough segment. This came from the White House's X account about their federal takeover of DC, boasting about all the black people they're rounding up now that the feds are controlling Washington. Every single person who's, I mean, these aren't technically mugshots, but that's what they serve as. Every single person who they publicized the arrest of was a non-white person, because they feel it is to their political advantage to do so. Sorry, Penny, go ahead.
Well, no, I just think that is so right. And to say that if we talk about political prisoners, there are political prisoners inside the U.S. And as you all have noted, it is African people and indigenous people. And, Sundiata Acoli was a black political prisoner who was in prison for 50 years, and they let him out when he was ready to die, basically. He was out for a few months. Leonard Peltier, an indigenous liberation, he was in for 50 years in prison. No, they don't do that. They didn't do that to the Weather Underground. No, they did not. And that's because of what the chairman says, that we live in a country with colonialism inside. It is made up of colonialism right here. There are two sets of laws. The chairman said he wasn't a citizen when they made the First Amendment. He was enslaved. His people were enslaved when they made the First Amendment in the United States. So, this is a struggle that exposes the fact that there are Mexican, indigenous, and African people literally colonized inside the borders of the United States and around the world. And that's our job as APSC. We talk to people about that. I wrote a book called Overturning the Culture of Violence that lays out all the statistics. Like even here in St. Louis, the difference between the white community and the black community in terms of assets is $800,000 per person.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
And it's much more even on a national level as a whole. In some cases, it's $1.4 million more that the average white person, I'm not talking about rich people, I'm talking about the value of their house, their car, their 401k, all of those things that are not, they're not available. And the way, we just had a tornado here, and the tornado hit right where the Uhuru house is. And hopefully you all will see some of the reality of what happened to the Black working class community in the city from the tornado. And 70% of the people don't have insurance. And the city is doing nothing to repair their roof, which is gone, for all of these. I think it was something like 15,000 homes that were seriously hit in North St. Louis. So you'll see it when you come here. And I really, that's why I think that why the stand of white people has to be to say we owe reparations, and reparations is a positive thing because it returns stolen resources that we gain based on genocide and slavery, and that this is how the world can go forward. When resources that actually African and indigenous people own, they belong to them.
Right.
Be returned, and we can't have a society without the oppressor and the oppressed, and that's what I fight for.
All right. Well, you can go to handsoffuhuru.org. There are donate and volunteer tabs. So you can see on the right-hand side, the donate tab. There's also a volunteer tab. So go to handsoffuhuru.org. That's how you can chip in and help. And Penny, we will be seeing you in just about a week and a half. And yeah, Lenny, if you want to join the doc, we'd be happy to interview you remotely from Chicago as well. So that would be wonderful. Thank you both. Thank you both so much for making the time, and we will be in touch.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Leonard.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye, Penny. Talk to you soon.
Uhuru.
Bye-bye, guys.
Uhuru.
All righty. Well, thanks to Leonard and Penny for making that happen. Apparently, Vito was posting in the chat they're experiencing some nasty weather there. That may have been responsible for some of the internet problems.
Oh, right now, yeah.
Yeah. That could be. That could be what's going on there. But yeah, we will be in St. Louis in just about a week and a half. I think 10 days. We are heading out there. So that is exciting. That is exciting. We are really looking forward to it. We've talked so long about launching our food blog on Instagram. So this is going to be the beginning of it. We're going to have some ribs. Yeah, some ribs.
Try
some
the fried ravioli. Yeah, some Budweiser.
Some local beer, some barbecue and pizza. Yeah, and the toasted ravioli. Yeah, that's their thing out there too. They also have like a butter cake
and
the
there's some cake that like is theirs. Just there, and the freaking the frozen custard thing.
Gotta have. Luckily, there's a hotel. There's a treadmill in the hotel I'm at. I'm gonna have to run that shit off. I'm gonna have a heart attack.
Seriously, I was thinking about that.
Butter cake, barbecue, pizza. Yeah. Wow.
Well, don't you have like problems, right? Do you have like high cholesterol or something?
I have high blood pressure. Yeah, I inherited that. So, but yeah, I mean that's all right. That's manageable. But yeah, I gotta work some of that off for sure. Dominic Morrow, thanks to the $4.99 over on YouTube. We got 1,100 strong filing in on YouTube, 523 in the Rumble chat. Thanks very much for being here. Dominic says, thanks for covering this important story. Of course. This has been one of our beats. That's why we wanted to do the movie, for sure. Killer Hitton says, dirtbags. I'm not saying Whitney Webb is a black pill op, but she definitely serves that purpose. Just watch her overwhelm and demoralize Brianna in 60 minutes. Also, there's not much info out there on her. Thanks, Killary Hinton. Appreciate that. Not that every single Epstein associate ought not to be catapulted to Uranus, but it appears M. Tracy may have introduced the notion of skepticism to some. Doorball Hedges egg face. Yeah, he just put out something on Hedges. I didn't read it. It was one of his shorter pieces, though. It looked. I'll read that article. It was more about Nick Bryant than Hedges, but he wants Hedges to pull the interview down that he did with Nick Bryant.
With Nick, okay. I haven't read the pieces, so I can't comment on the pieces.
Well, he paywalled the Whitney Webb pieces. He only published half of them for free.
Yeah, we know how to get around that.
On Substack, it's hard.
Yeah, it depends. If it's a big enough article, if it makes a big enough splash, usually
they archive it or something. Yeah.
Yeah, usually we could get it. Just looking at some of his tweets, this is the thing with Michael Tracy. He enjoys trolling so much that you can't just take what he says at face value. You really got to look at it. Again, I can't comment on the articles themselves. I don't know exactly what he's addressing. you know, any reasonable person will say, like, and we said this in our New York Times interior photos piece, just because there's a picture of the Pope or Fidel Castro or Mick Jagger with Epstein, that doesn't mean they were, you know, involved in his crimes. He got around. He had billions of dollars. That's the thing. How'd he get those billions of dollars? From what I've seen with what Michael Tracy has said just in his tweets, he's kind of overemphasizing that point, which I think is obvious, and underemphasizing any way you slice it. Doesn't matter how you slice it. How did this guy, who's I don't even, what did he have, a BA? This guy?
Yeah, he's a high school teacher or something, right? What did he teach?
How does this high school teacher wind up with a private fucking island? Okay, that doesn't happen in real life. So that's where you got to take it with a grain of salt, because it seems like Tracy is motivated by trying to find where he can find holes, as if the big picture is not really the relevant story here. As if you're going after this, you're being ridiculous. You're being ridiculous. What do you mean? Of course. High school teachers wind up with private islands and working as financial advisors to billionaires all the time. Happens all the time.
Well, you know, with any story where there's more unknowns than knowns, right? Like Epstein or like 9/11, right? You always get people who, you know, try to paint too precise a picture and end up either contradicting themselves or going out on a limb and getting something wrong, right?
Sure.
Like the core thesis that what happened on 9/11 is not anything like as was presented to the public, and that there is almost certainly government shenanigans involved, right? That to me is fairly obvious. That doesn't mean I don't run into a lot of 9/11 truther kooks who try to make up their own precise story about exactly what happened. And yes, they say a lot of things.
Do you know how
happen,
many,
or they get a
do you
lot
know
of
how
things
many
wrong.
Thai
That doesn't mean that,
restaurants
like, that doesn't
opened
mean
the
there was
year
nothing
before
to see
9/11?
there. Right. That doesn't mean there was nothing to see about that. Right. I didn't hear what you said.
Do you know how many Thai restaurants they opened the year before 9/11?
Yeah, right, exactly.
There were
Like,
no Thai restaurants
Yeah,
in
right.
New York, and then all of a sudden there's 150.
Right. Like, you'll always have people who see something that's not there when there's more unknown than known about a thing, because it falls to them in their mind to fill in the blanks. Right. And most of what you fill in the blanks with is bullshit. But that doesn't mean that there's nothing there. Doesn't mean that there's nothing to the core theory.
Yeah, that's the thing, because I can't remember who it was with. He did like a little interview when the whole thing started blowing up, and he sounded fucking ridiculous. Like, the interview was very like, nothing to see here. Nothing to see here.
I think that was with Breaking Points.
You know what I'm talking about? Yeah,
I think it was with Sagar. I'm pretty sure.
It was very, I think you're right. And that's why I say, like, come on, man. Come on. So I have to read his articles, but based on what I've seen him tweet and what he said in interviews, seems like a lot of this is just he's taking special delight in being the contrarian in this situation. And for all the reasons that you're saying, it doesn't mean he might not be right on this point or on that point, because by definition, we can't get these files.
Right. We don't know.
So,
right.
Any reporting anyone is doing is by definition speculation.
Right.
But look at the overall picture. To suggest that it's ridiculous to be this, to be obsessing on this, well, I mean, that calls your own credibility into question.
I mean, just look at Donald Trump's behavior whenever he's asked about this.
Right.
He sounds like the guiltiest man alive. Right.
Right.
Vander Zarkov says, legal question for Brother Keaton and Russ. Can a jazz man be compelled to testify? Thank you. I think he can. He just has to give that disclaimer before, when they say, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth? You have to say, yes, but I'm a jazz man.
I'm a jazz man.
Keep that in mind. Yep. Yes, but there's a caveat, right? And then you could say whatever you want. I guess that's how it works.
Jazz man plays by his own rules.
Plays by his own rules. That's right. All right, everybody. We will move right on now to segment number 2 on the day. 1,200 strong in the YouTube chat, 544 over on Rumble. Smash that like button. Let's get a crowd in here. this afternoon. So yesterday was a big day in Washington, D.C., and it was foreshadowed the day before yesterday when Donald Trump sent out the following on Truth Social. We're having a news conference tomorrow, meaning yesterday, in the White House. What do we say? Due dissidence. Yesterday's news tomorrow. That's right. We're having a news conference tomorrow in the White House. I'm going to make our Capitol safer and more beautiful than it ever was before. The homeless have to move out immediately. Oh, really? Okay. How many homeless got the message? You have to give the homeless people more than 3 hours notice, because as I understand, most of them don't have Truth Social subscriptions. We will give you places to stay, but far from the Capitol. Really? Where? The criminals, you don't have to move. You don't have to move out. We're going to put you in jail where you belong. It's all going to happen very fast, just like the border. We went from millions pouring in to zero in the last few months. This will be easier. Be prepared. There will be no Mr. Nice Guy. We want our Capitol back. Thank you for your attention to this matter. So, yes, the next day, he made good on his promise. Trump takes over D.C. police, an extraordinary move, deploys National Guard in the Capitol. U.S. President Donald Trump said on Monday he was deploying 800 National Guard troops to Washington and temporarily taking over the city's police department, an extraordinary assertion of presidential power in the nation's capital. The president cast his actions as necessary to rescue Washington from a purported wave of lawlessness. Statistics show that violent crime shot up in 2023, but has been rapidly declining since. Here is Donald Trump explaining the plan.
Now, the murder rate in Washington today is higher than that of Bogota, Colombia, Mexico City, some of the places that you hear about as being the worst places on earth, much higher. This is much higher. The number of car thefts has doubled over the past 5 years, and the number of carjackings has more than tripled. Murders in 2023 reached the highest rate probably ever. They say 25 years, but they don't know what that means because it just goes back 25 years. Can't be worse.
Okay, so the murder rate in D.C., or the violent crime rate, I should say, is at a 30-year low. 30-year low.
Our capital city has been overtaken by violent gangs and bloodthirsty criminals, roving mobs of wild youth, drugged-out maniacs and homeless people. And we're not going to let it happen anymore. We're not going to take it.
We're not going to take it. We're not going to take it.
Yeah,
they should have broke out in song.
Yeah, those numbers didn't sound right to me. I was just there, and I was staying in what I have a reliable authority is one of the rougher, more infamous neighborhoods in town. It was fine.
It's fine.
It was fine. Yeah, like I never felt threatened in any way. No.
Yeah, no, those numbers are not accurate, as we'll see. It is the second time this summer that the Republican president has deployed troops to a democratically governed city. A federal trial began on Monday in San Francisco on whether Trump violated U.S. law by deploying National Guard troops to Los Angeles in June without the approval of California Governor Gavin Newsom. And Trump signaled that other major U.S. cities with Democratic leadership could be next, including Chicago, a city that has long been beset by violent crime, although it was down significantly in the first half of the year. Just stay out of St. Louis for a few weeks. Will you? Because that'll make our lives a lot more complicated. So here is Trump floating this very idea. Trump says he may take control of New York, Chicago, and other cities just like D.C.
I have the same thing here, but then I'm going to look at New York in a little while. Let's do this. Let's do this together. Let's see. It's going to go pretty quickly. And if we need to, we're going to do the same thing in Chicago, which is a disaster. We have a mayor there who's totally incompetent. He's an incompetent man. And we have an incompetent governor there. Pritzker's an incompetent. His family threw him out of the business, and he ran for governor. And now I understand he wants to be president. but I noticed he lost a little weight, so maybe he has a chance. You know, you never know what happens. But Pritzker's a gross incompetent
Take
guy,
a dig
thrown
there.
out of the family business. But when I look at Chicago and I look at L.A., if we didn't go to L.A. 3 months ago, L.A. would be burning like the part that didn't burn. If he would have allowed the water to come down, which I told him about in my first term. I said,
All right, now he goes on a rant about the water. They're not just Democrat-run cities; they're black-run cities with black mayors.
Funny how that works.
Yeah, DC now, first LA, then DC. Now he's talking about Chicago next with a black mayor. During Trump's election campaign, his law and order platform often had racial undertones. See, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. He singled out majority Democratic cities like Baltimore, Chicago, and Washington, all with large black populations and black mayors, black mayor of Baltimore as well, when he spoke out about rampant crime in urban areas. And as I teased out in the previous segment with Lenny and Penny, the White House really made it pretty obvious what their signaling is here. Operation DC Safe and Beautiful. That's the name. Operation Making DC Safe and Beautiful. Multi-agency task forces are hitting the streets of Washington, D.C., cleaning up crime and keeping our neighborhoods safe. In just one night, they arrested 37 criminals, seized 11 illegal firearms, and issued 4 narcotic charges. And you can see all of the pictures here. Black and brown men. Every single one on the thread. What did they release? I think 9 photos. All
just playing the classics.
Yes.
Going full Wooly Horton.
Exactly. Hundreds of officers and agents from more than a dozen federal agencies have fanned out across Washington in recent days. Attorney General Pam Bondi will oversee the police force, Trump said. The U.S. Army said the National Guard troops would carry out a number of tasks. Well, if Epstein is alive, he can get off of that Greek island and he can move to D.C. now because Pam Bondi's in charge, so nothing will happen to him. He can move back to Washington. He can become an American again.
Go back in business.
Yeah, back in business, right? He could start managing people's fine. He could have Woody Allen over for dinner again. He'll be fine. The U.S. Army said the National Guard troops would carry out a number of tasks, including administrative, logistics, and physical presence in support of law enforcement. Between 100 and 200 of the troops would be supporting law enforcement at any given time. The Democratic mayor of Washington, Muriel Bowser, has pushed back on Trump's claim of unchecked violence, noting that violent crime hit its lowest level in more than 3 decades last year. Violent crime, including murders, soared in 2023, turning Washington into one of the nation's deadliest cities. However, violent crime dropped 35% in 2024, according to federal data, and it has fallen an additional 26% in the first 7 months of 2025, according to city police. So, yes, to corroborate that, here's a Guardian write-up. Violent crime in D.C. is at a 30-year low. Crime trends have dramatically changed since 2023. In January, the Metropolitan Police Department and U.S. Attorney's Office released a report indicating that total violent crime in D.C. in 2024 was down 35% from the prior year, marking the lowest rate in over 30 years. And if you look here, this was a chart published by the Washington Post, sourced from the Metropolitan Police Department itself, as you can see, significantly lower than in recent years. And regarding Trump's claim about the homeless, here you have unhoused people are victimized at high rates. Victimized at high rates, not perpetrating crimes at high rates, but the victim of violent crimes at higher rates. So Trump's recent push to crack down on homelessness through an executive order linked unhoused people to crime, saying endemic vagrancy, disorderly behavior, sudden confrontations, and violent attacks have made our cities unsafe. Data, however, has consistently shown that unhoused people are more likely to be victims than perpetrators of violent crime. In one of the largest studies of homelessness in decades, researchers at the University of California, San Francisco surveyed thousands of unhoused people in 2021 and 2022 and found that 36% of all participants reported experiencing physical violence during their current homelessness episode. Of those, half reported that the violence was committed by a stranger. Here is Donald Trump, though, doubling down on his claim that we're going to rid the city of these violent homeless people. We are getting rid of the slums here in Washington, D.C., he says.
Situation of complete and total lawlessness. And we're getting rid of the slums, too. We have slums here. We're getting rid of them. I know it's not politically correct. You'll say, oh, so terrible. No, we're getting rid of the slums where they live. Caravans of mass youth rampage through city streets at all times of the day. There are ATVs, motorbikes. They travel pretty well. Entire neighborhoods are now under emergency curfews. Just this past weekend, gunfire went through, and you saw that, the Navy Yard. I saw it this morning. They saw that they fought back against law. See, they fight back until you knock the hell out of them, because it's the only language they understand. But they fought back against law enforcement last night. And they're not going to be fighting back long, because I've instructed them and told them whatever happens, they love to spit in the face of the police. As the police are standing up there in uniform, they're standing and they're screaming at them an inch away from their face. And then they start spitting in their face. And I said, you tell them, you spit and we hit. And they can hit real hard.
Yep. Here's the mayor of Washington, D.C., Muriel Bowser, responding to Trump's plans to take over the city.
True that we experienced a crime spike post-COVID, but we worked quickly to put laws in place and tactics that got violent offenders off our streets and gave our police officers more tools, which is why we have seen a huge decrease in crime because of those efforts. We have been able to reverse that 2023 crime spike. This year, crime isn't just down from 2023, it's also down from 2019, before the pandemic, and we're at a 30-year violent crime low. We're not satisfied. We haven't taken our foot off the gas, and we continue to look for ways to make our city safer.
And here,
imagine a black woman who was a Republican became mayor of D.C. and crime hit a 30-year low. What would Trump be saying about that?
Of course, right? Yeah, exactly. Good point, Charles. But here is Baltimore Mayor Brandon Scott feeling perhaps his city is next, since it's pretty close to Washington, so it wouldn't take much logistically to move the National Guard up after this 30-day period. They can do this for a maximum of 30 days. So it's going to be the National Guard Federal Police Tour of 2025, folks. So a traveling road show of National Guard troops commandeering a city near you. So here he is giving his 2 cents about this.
Presence in Washington, D.C. Is that the right way to fight crime here, given your experience in Baltimore?
No. And I think we all know that, right? And we all know what the president is doing is really just spitting this right-wing propaganda and using the media in the bully pulpit of the highest office of the land to push things that we know. No one in D.C., my sister mayor is not saying that they don't have issues to work on, but the reality is that D.C.'s violent crime is at a 30-year low. And quite frankly, that's the case for cities around the country. I think it's very notable that each and every one of the cities called out by the president has a black mayor, and most of those cities are seeing historic lows in violent crime. In my city, in Baltimore, we have the fewest amount of homicides through this date on record. That's 50 years, a 50-year low. Maybe we are too far gone from the broken right-wing policies of zero-tolerance policing and all the things that did not make our cities safer for all those many years. But we know that having the military there is not the way to do it. The way to drive down violence in cities has been proving. Mayors across the country have brought together law enforcement, the legal community, the actual community, the community violence intervention work to reduce violence across this country and cities to lows that we have not seen in decades. The president could learn a lot from us instead of throwing things at us.
Yeah, I think that is pretty well said. Here are some protesters on the streets chanting "Free DC, he can't take it." They're also defending their right to home rule because DC is, of course, not a state. And so many are saying this is an argument for DC statehood, which puts, theoretically at least, an obstacle in Trump's way, although he did this in California and it's in court. So we'll see what happens. But here they are.
Free DC! Free DC! Free DC! Protect home rule! 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 Protect home rule!
This morning because Trump is trying to take over DC. He's having a press conference and he wants to assert more of his authority over DC, and we are here to say he can't have it. Stay with me. He can't have it. He can't have it.
And finally, this is a bit of a more humorous take, but this DC resident says, hey, as long as you're sending the feds in to police us, maybe someone wants to pick up my trash and cut my grass while they're here.
Reason. Because if it's safety and crime the president is worried about, Green has some thoughts to add to his agenda.
Or is he going to come pick up our trash next? Is that what I should expect? We do have areas with high grass that he can cut. I have infrastructure problems in my community. Can he put some funding on the table for that?
He shouldn't be making those kind of decisions. That's more like a dictator.
Gotti thinks that if this is the way the administration is going to continue...
Everybody now is in like a big old gumbo pot of, you know what I'm saying? You don't know what's in it. You know what I'm saying? That's all. You don't know what you're going to get served.
Okay. So when it comes to the issue of crime, I think Democrats and liberals do themselves no favors by dismissing the effect of crime on people's lives. Crime destroys people. It destroys families. It's something to take very seriously as a problem affecting all places, especially big cities where you have large groups of people concentrated in relatively small areas. And as these mayors are saying, they have not solved the problem of crime, but they have definitely turned a corner and seem to be heading in the right direction. This is a national trend. It's a national trend where crime spiked right after COVID for a number of reasons, and now it is on its way down. So rather than lying and saying that crime numbers are through the roof, when anybody can look at a chart and see that they are clearly not, they are coming down, maybe work with some of these cities and states and mayors, coordinate, build community. That's what you would do if you were actually interested in reducing crime. On the homeless question, I think it's also worth pointing out that, you know, there's been this sort of like weird way of thinking on the left that the empathetic thing to do to homeless people is to leave them alone. And I don't think that's necessarily true. If you look at the stats there, 36% of homeless people are victims of violent crimes. That means they're not safe on the streets. So you know what you should do? Rather than leave them alone and fantasize about how being homeless is empowering, you know what you can do? You can build them houses and put them in houses, right? Like the right-wing solution is not the answer either, which is scare them out of town or throw them in prison. And by the way, I will not take credit for having this thought, but I've seen it written and tweeted about a lot. What do you think these ICE prisons are for that they're going to build? What do you think? The immigrants are going to be here forever? No, the ICE prisons are for the people after the immigrants are all dealt with. And multiple people have said the next group on the list of people to lock up are going to be the homeless. They're going to go from one undesirable group to the other. So if you don't think they are testing the waters and priming the public for the idea that homeless people should be criminalized and imprisoned for their own safety and for the safety of the society, I think that is what they are up to here. And I think that is what this is about in the end. It's certainly not about fighting crime. If it were, they wouldn't be lying about all of these crime stats. This is another escalation of the police state. You have a federal police force, which is going to get a massive cash infusion over these next few years, thanks to the one big, beautiful bill. They're going to have a lot of housing, quote unquote, a lot of alligator Alcatrazes that they can build. And once they don't need them for immigrants anymore, I do believe that the homeless people are next on the list. And of course, the other motivation for Pam Bondi is to get people to stop thinking about the Epstein case. Of course, last night around this time, DC Takeover and all, the following was still trending. Pedo President Trump and Epstein Trump files. There seems to be a contingent of people who understands that every stunt like this is ultimately a distraction, not just from the Epstein files, but from their failing record on just about every single issue, be it Israel, Gaza, Ukraine, Russia, the economy, inflation. He just had to delay the tariffs with China because people are getting sticker shock already. I've gotten sticker shock already. I go to the same, grocery stores. I've noticed shit is more expensive since these tariffs kicked in. And their reflex is always, when they are in trouble, revert to crime and punishment. This is a signature trademark of fascists, an obsession with crime and punishment. And they feel like this is the only political argument they are comfortable making that they trust will have legs. And a lot of crime and punishment signaling does have legs because people are, for good reason, concerned about crime in their cities and their areas. But when you look at all of the actual information around this issue, they're wrong about all of it. They're wrong about all of it. So then why are they doing it? You have to ask yourself that.
Yeah. A lot of this is just basic psychology, the way we're wired as animals. We hone right in on warnings of danger. That's why in a less consequential area, economic news, there is a whole cottage industry in the market is crashing next week.
Right.
No matter when you check in, you will find hundreds, thousands of articles and videos. The crash has already started. Next, economist says market is over next month. Right? Why? Because people want to hear that. This narrative, I remember when I used to drive a horse and carriage, I had a guy in the back of my carriage talking about crime in New York. And I told him, you want to see a lot of crime in New York? We have a time machine on 90th Street. You can get in it, and you'll see a lot of crime if you go back to 1976. And whenever I would tell somebody that, no, I mean, really, the most dangerous thing you're going to see in Central Park now is a metrosexual jogging club. They hated. They would not accept it. Well, I heard if you're here after dark, you better watch out. Like, they were so disappointed to hear that this danger didn't exist. It's very addicting. As that moral philosopher Charles Manson once observed in one of his interviews, they sell that fear. The old ladies, they go to the supermarket, they buy the newspaper, they love to buy that fear. But he was right, man. They do. They're fascinated by that, and that's what they're relying on, as you say, as a distraction from Epstein and the failings of their policies. They don't care about speaking to the public in general. They care about speaking to their core base that needs that, that is attracted to that. And you have, I've called it the peasant mind. You got a lot of people, and it's not even unique to our era. You look at the whole of human history. Jared Diamond in Guns, Germs, and Steel tells a great story about how the Spanish brought natives to Spain. And when they saw people living in just absolute wretched poverty, and then they were shown the palaces, they didn't understand why the people didn't unite to kill all the nobles. Like, they didn't get how something like that would actually work. But remember, they're coming from a tribal society. You don't have that kind of inequality of economic resources in a tribe. You really don't see that kind of grotesque inequality until you get a level of social organization you can define as a state. But what is that makes people, the king, the queen? We still talk about royals. We still talk about royal families. We still talk about celebrities. That's the peasant mind. It's ingrained in us. They rely on that tendency to look towards danger and that tendency of people to want to be peasants. And they've programmed people to worship oligarchs and to project their fear onto these people that they can see themselves as better than, whether they're immigrants, whether they're homeless people, people of other races, what have you. But also in terms of the tactics that they're deploying, this is inevitable because it's the only thing you can do in lieu of providing for your population.
Right.
You want to solve homelessness, you want to solve crime, go to Europe, and I'm not saying it doesn't exist. You're going to see very little, man. You're going to see very little. It is so rare that you see a homeless person camped out on the street in Europe. Anyway, yeah, occasionally. I mean, I'm not going to say it doesn't exist. Very, very, very rare because they have a very robust social safety net. If you don't want to provide a social safety net because you want to keep funneling all the resources up to the oligarchs, well, then you got to send out this militarized police force to brutalize people. And you want to eliminate homelessness without actually providing homes, well, then you provide prisons. And just quickly, what you're saying, you're absolutely right. What do you think they're going to go through all this recruiting, hiring putting billions of dollars into payrolls, hiring all of these people, building all of these facilities? You already have the farm workers are not showing up. You already have what migrants and immigrants you have in this country already going underground with the crops rotting in the fields. A lot of them are going to leave. You're certainly not going to have more coming in. So, yeah, that problem is going to be solved. What do you think? They're just going to fire everybody? They're going to tell everybody to go home? No, they're going to turn all of this on you. Absolutely.
Yes. And I think the homeless are the first group. I mean, they're already signaling that
right
pretty loud and clear. And they're also signaling that they're going to create a lot more homeless people by slashing healthcare. I mean, medical debt is going to go through the roof. You're going to have a lot of people forced to leave their homes. And so, it's a recipe for disaster. And in the short term, they're going to exploit people's legitimate fears and concerns about crime in order to build the police state even further. As homelessness increases, so does crime. The stat there, 36% of homeless people victims of a violent crime. I've been researching about St. Louis since we're doing this documentary on the African People's Socialist Party. So just getting background on the city, for relevant backstory. And St. Louis has a relatively high crime rate. According to one thing I read, 42% of crime, especially, in the northern areas of the city, take place in abandoned buildings. They're drug crimes that take place in abandoned buildings for people with nowhere to live. So the more homelessness you have, the more crime you're going to have. The more you slash the social safety net, the more homeless people you're going to have, the more demand there is going to be for these ICE jails that they're building now with this new budget they have. Now, the only question is, are they able to hire people to fill the ICE jails because they're having a tough time recruiting?
Well, there's
know.
that.
That's the only thing that can save us is if the American people just kind of decide, you know what, we don't want to do this. They call that book Edna Shrugged. You just can't hire. You just can't. What if the disaffected white working class just decides, we don't want to do that, so it won't happen. That's the only thing that could save us now. But big picture, not good.
But if you look at what they're doing, cutting what little is left of the social safety net, it's all of a piece. You drive the people to such a state of desperation, they don't feel like they have a choice.
Right. Of course. That's right.
Why do people join the military, man?
Right.
You see a lot of rich kids joining the military?
Exactly. Ava Session 7 says, hey, plan to recommend Sweetie Pies in St. Louis, but it was closed due to VA expansion. Was owned by a former ICAT. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I know there's a big music scene there. There's the Blues Museum there. So yeah, there's
man. We're gonna go to all these places.
Check them all out. Sloppy Memes, thanks for the $9.99. Mehdi Hassan says, I nailed Taibbi in a mistake, therefore the Twitter files aren't real. Tracy says, I nailed Webb on a mistake, therefore Epstein is a nothing burger, but both are real. Yeah, it's a good example. Sloppy Memes. Thank you for that. Jay Bell, please have Nima Tavali Rudsari on, Iranian-born soccer journalist, podcaster, and knowledgeable about Palestine, Israel, and FIFA. Interesting. That does sound interesting, Jay Bell. Thank you. Andy Gardner says, I want to be the president for all Americans. You spit, we hit. Interesting. Yeah, exactly. Vito P says, proud to be a donor, a member, and supporter of and volunteer of African People's Socialist Party. Beautiful people.
Oh,
Uhuru.
cool.
Cancer sucks, you guys, and a girl rock. Thank you, Vito. Yes,
Nice.
Vito
I didn't know that.
is Vito's in Missouri. I don't know how close to St. Louis you are. I think you're southern Missouri, if I remember correctly, but maybe I'm wrong about that. Progressive Lefty says, happy belated birthday, Russ. Nice to catch you guys live. Been doing summer stuff.
I did watch my ex. I'll put up pictures every year. Usually I do it on my birthday. This year I hung out with friends who aren't going to go there, but I went to Coney Island yesterday. That was my annual pilgrimage. It was lovely. That is my favorite place in New York, man. It's the last place in New York that feels like New York.
Mm-hmm.
They have done a great job
it's a time capsule.
updating it, but making it still feel like what it always was. Yeah,
Right.
It really is. Like they still have the Midway with the games and the ring toss. Like all that shit's still there. It's so cool.
They still charge you $0.25 to use the bathroom?
No.
Okay. So yeah, they've modernized in a good way.
Yes.
Good way. You can take a piss for free now. That's nice.
I always go to Gargiulo's, the Italian restaurant. It's been there, I think, since the 20s.
Wow. Professor Brown, no disagreement there then. Anyway, that Bryant's RFK brainworm voice could be a grifter alarm. Oh, thank you, Professor Brown. No, appreciate that. Alrighty. Let's move right on along here. What do we got? Oh, yes, the new labor guy.
All right. So let me introduce you to our new Bureau of Labor Statistics head, E.J. Antoni. He went on, this was before Trump even fired the former head for giving him numbers that he didn't like. He went on with Steve Bannon to complain about the numbers and the fact that they don't have a friendly at the Bureau of Labor Statistics.
I want to talk about something you've been on here for 4 years complained about, and that is the Bureau of Labor Statistics and whether we get accurate numbers. Now, everybody's talking about the number here. It's 250,000 jobs. They're like on the downside. It turns out we didn't get, and now it's a restatement. What in the hell is going on there? And have we put in our own person into BLS? Is a MAGA Republican that President Trump knows and trusts? Are they running the Bureau of Labor Statistics yet, sir?
No, unfortunately, Steve, we still haven't gotten there. And I think that's part of the reason why we continue to have all of these different data problems. You know, the guy we had previously, Bill Beach, is actually a great guy, brilliant statistician, and he recognized some of the problems that we had in the data. He was taking steps to fix that. But unfortunately, he was removed by the Biden administration. He's not there anymore.
Okay. Make note of his background. That's going to come up later. Okay. The implications of that are pretty terrifying. Do we have a MAGA person in at the Bureau of Labor Statistics? Now, in theory, that should not matter. You can't even really blame. I would be the first to say, well, it's not like they don't have technocratic experts in under a president like Obama and then go and destroy the lives of homeowners while letting the bankers skate. But that has nothing to do with the statistics. That's their political policy. That's what they choose to do with the numbers. Up until now, literally up until this appointment, it's always been understood that you just have to have a technocrat who's capable and competent in that role. Now, could you argue that maybe there are flaws in the system with how they gather data? Maybe, but that's not what this is about. This is Trump did not like the jobs number and decided to go full banana republic and install somebody whose numbers he's going to like, somebody who's ideological rather than technocratic, which has a lot of implications in terms of how credit rating agencies evaluate the United States going forward, how foreign countries doing trade and deals with us regard the numbers going forward. As you will see, he could not have picked a bigger clown for this job. If you really want everyone not to trust you and to assume that you fired the last person for political reasons, this has nothing to do with updating the way the BLS operates. You couldn't do better than this guy. So here is his customary announcement via Truth Social. That's how he likes to announce appointments and everything else. I am pleased to announce that I am nominating highly respected economist. Not true at all. At all. He's kind of the Thomas Friedman of economists, as we will see. Dr. E.J. Antoni as the next commissioner of the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Our economy is booming, and EJ will ensure that the numbers released are honest and accurate. I know EJ Antoni will do an incredible job in his new role.
Oh,
Congratulations, EJ. If you consider his new role being to fillet Trump on a regular basis, then yeah, a guy looks like he has a good deep mouth for that. Trump picks EJ Antoni as new Bureau Labor Statistics head after firing old commissioner amid weak jobs report. This is from CBS News. President Trump announced EJ Antoni as his nominee to lead the Bureau of Labor Statistics on Monday after he fired the former commissioner earlier this month, blaming her for a weaker than expected jobs report. Antoni is a fellow at the Conservative Heritage Foundation think tank, and he holds a doctorate in economics from Northern Illinois University. That famous breeding ground of great economists. He's defended Mr. Trump's economic policy moves in the past, including the president's tariff strategy. He has also criticized the BLS for low response rates and questioned the agency's methodology, calling its health insurance figures phony baloney last year, and at one point joking that the L is silent in BLS's name. Quote, Doge needs to take a chainsaw to the BLS, he wrote in a November post on X. Quote, there are better ways to collect, process, and disseminate data. That is the task for the next BLS commissioner, and only consistent delivery of accurate data in a timely manner will rebuild the trust that has been lost over the last several years, he wrote shortly after Mr. Trump fired the former BLS chief. See, that's how you get a job. Antoni will need to be confirmed by the Senate. Well, with this crew, his confirmation is almost assured. All right, this is Richard Hanania. How shallow is the MAGA talent pool? EJ Antoni, who is going to be collecting labor statistics, went to an economics program that doesn't rank within the top 100. He appears to have published one article with one citation. His predecessor had over 1,300 citations. A little bit here about the program he went to. Northern Illinois University is not considered a top-ranked economics program in the U.S., especially compared to the major research universities that dominate economics rankings. Here's a breakdown of its standing. National reputation. NIU's economics department is generally seen as a regional, teaching-focused program rather than a research powerhouse. It's not ranked among the top 50 or even top 100 in most U.S. News or REPEC Global Research Impact lists. All right, so listen, man, far be it from me to say that you can't get a talented person who comes out of a program like that, or, you know, maybe they came up from under, they didn't have those opportunities. That's not this guy. That's not this guy. If that were this guy, he'd have published a lot of papers. He'd have done some brilliant research. No, this is a very unaccomplished person who's just been put in charge of a very complicated agency for political reasons exclusively. This is Justin Wolfers. He has a pretty popular economics podcast. Let's focus on qualifications. Antony finished grad school 5 years ago at Northern Illinois with no obvious distinction. His dissertation is meh and involved no research on labor markets or data collection. He has never published a paper, and his life's work has earned 1 citation. This record would be insufficient to earn a job as a junior staffer at BLS. Well, that's if you're hiring people for their qualifications, other than sucking Trump's dick. So I mentioned Thomas Friedman. It's pretty funny because as I researched this guy, I found that for conservative economists, yes, conservative economists, he's like their Thomas Friedman. What Thomas Friedman is for Matt Taibbi, that's what Antony is for conservative economists. He posts these just asinine things, and they just love to rip him apart for being as completely ignorant, unqualified, and bad at his job as he is. So let's look at a few examples. So he posted, despite disappointing headline, this is before Trump decided the numbers aren't really the numbers. The marching orders were still to put a good face on the jobs report numbers. Despite disappointing headline, this jobs report was best July ever for employment among native-born Americans, up 2 million year over year, and annual growth 2.2 million faster than among foreign-born workers. Native-born American employment is now 1.8 million above pre-pandemic level. So that's almost entirely completely wrong, according to multiple sources. Here's just one of them, Joel Griffith. The native-born unemployment rate rose for the 3rd straight month in July and is now at the highest level since April 2021. Although the number of those employed is up this year, 2.47 million, the reported native-born working age population rose by a far greater 3.94 million. So if you follow that and think through the implications of having a guy like this as the person who's handing out the economic reports for the government, not good. Believe me, not good. You understand what he did? He basically didn't account for the growth in the population and just went ahead and said, oh yeah, no, we're having great employment growth, not accounting for the fact that you're dealing with a large population. I'm not even a math guy, and I get that. This guy is supposed to be an economist. Wow. And hey, man, this guy's a senior fellow at a right-wing think tank, American Freedom Institute, I think it is. He's also at the Heritage Foundation, as is Antony. Yeah, man, right, free market economist. Yeah, conservative.
Israeli
guy.
flag in bio.
Yep, Daily Signal, right? So conservative guy. Here's Joey Politano. He's not so political, this guy. He has like an economics blog that focuses on statistics. An economist so dumb, I had to explain to him how the import price index works last month will now lead the BLS. Kill me. All right, so Antony tweeted this out about how prices are not going up. Import prices just came in way below expectations. June was up from just 0.1% month over month, negative 0.2% year over year, while May saw a huge downward revision from flat to 0.4% month over month, still waiting for tariffs to be passed on by foreign producers. And Politano points out to him, the import price index measure pre-tariff prices. The fact that pre-tariff prices are basically flat means Americans are paying the tariffs. Though I wouldn't expect a Heritage Foundation guy like yourself to be smart enough to understand basic stuff like that. Okay? So you understand, like, he's completely misinterpreting what these numbers even represent. The fact that these are flat, but these tariffs are being collected, means they're not paying them. We're paying them. This is your new head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Jessica Rydell. I've never met E.J. Antoni because he is not seen in many D.C. policy circles. However, the articles and tweets I've seen him publish are probably the most error-filled of any think tank economist right now. I hope we see better at BLS. Is she some lefty? Nope. Manhattan Institute fellow. Manhattan Institute. These guys worship Ayn Rand. She's no left-wing economist by any means. So yeah, and one last one. This guy's just a professor. Since E.J. Antoni is now Trump's nominee to head the Bureau of Labor Statistics, I wanted to flash back to that time when I, a nobody professor in Vermont, had to explain to him some very basic facts about labor statistics. This guy is a joke. And here you have the classic Batman meme. This was tweeted out by Antoni. How can the economy be bad when jobs are growing so fast? Slap. Because everyone has two of them. So he's saying the job growth is not that more people are getting jobs. It's that more people have two jobs. So Professor Winslet here tweeted back, this is factually wrong. The percentage of people with two jobs is down. And also the most likely people to have two jobs are people with postgraduate degrees. And he provides, unlike Antoni, who provided a Batman meme, he actually provided numbers, charts, statistics. You know, we don't think about this, but we just saw it actually in the profile of one of the economists that responded to him. A lot of the people who have more opportunities take those opportunities. They're on this board, they're on that board. That counts as more than one job. Like, we don't think of it that way because it's a very privileged kind of jobs, but it is multiple jobs. If you're on the board here, you're at a think tank there. Yeah, so I would imagine that's why you get that number. Okay, so I just want to take a look at a couple of Democrat-aligned economists, because I do want to make the point of how they have conducted themselves over the years. So, you know, Brendan Duke, he was a Kamala Biden administration economist. Antoni has distinguished himself with his lack of shame in producing viral, dishonest analyses that have been criticized by honest conservative analysts. If he brings that lack of shame to the production of official economic statistics, their reliability could be in question. Well, thank you, Captain Obvious. And Jason Furman, he was an Obama-era economist. I don't think I have ever publicly criticized any presidential nominee before, but E.J. Antoni is completely unqualified to be BLS commissioner. He is an extreme partisan and does not have any relevant expertise. He would be a break from decades of nonpartisan technocrats. Okay, now that's true as far as it goes, but you motherfuckers need to have all the seats, because the reason that a guy was elected who could even make the argument that someone who so clearly is an unqualified political partisan couldn't do any worse is because of what your crew did with your technocratic information. Did you use it to help people? Did you do good for people? There's ProPublica back in 2011, this article came out. Dems, Obama broke pledge to force banks to help homeowners. Candidate Obama pledged to support real change in bankruptcy laws to help foundering homeowners. But when it came time to fight for the measure, he didn't show up. Some Democrats now say his administration actually undermined it behind the scenes. And this is where this comes from. People are always talking about, we have a lot of people who actually have podcasts who talk about how they lost the House under Obama. What did he do with the bankers? They skated. There was a great article, I think it was the Times, when he first got in office, about how the bankers went into the Oval Office all nervous, all scared, and then they walked out laughing. He asked them, "What do you guys need?" So you want to now beat your breast about the fact that a completely unqualified goon is being installed at the Bureau of Labor Statistics? Well, it's your fucking fault. This whole thing is your fault. The fact that this guy is the president is your fault. This is the reason people don't trust experts anymore. That's not an argument for, well, it doesn't matter who's at the Bureau of Labor Statistics. I don't believe that, but you made people feel that way because you know what? You showed it doesn't matter for them. You might as well just have a political partisan if this is what you're going to do with the accurate numbers. No matter who's in charge, they get fucked. So what do they care? That's why this hysteria around appointing an unqualified political hack is not going to play beyond the libs, man. Yeah, they're going to watch Rachel Maddow and they're going to cry about it. Most people aren't going to care because you gave them no reason to care. There was a time when Republican, Democrat, no matter who it was, would have agreed you have to trust the experts. I was very young, but I remember that. I remember when people said, well, hey, this guy has degrees and this is what he says. And even a conservative usually would have deferred to that. Not anymore because of you. Because you people told them that NAFTA was going to create better jobs, because you told them there were WMDs in Iraq. You all voted to go invade this country that wound up not having any of those weapons. This is why nobody trusts you. You forced a jab on people that it turns out was very questionable. You put all that together, and honestly, that was the final straw for a lot of people, I think. Nobody cares. Nobody trusts the experts, so you can't make an argument based on expertise anymore. Like, you're not wrong, but take responsibility. You caused it. You got us to a world where nobody cares about a guy like this being in charge of the government's numbers. And what did he do? Before he's even gotten confirmed in the Senate, he goes on Fox, and Tony suggests suspending monthly jobs report. Full banana republic from Alliant Capital. Absolutely. Now, I told you to look at that background on Steve Bannon because apparently he changed it. Capital hunters. Can we ask why Trump's new hire for the Bureau of Labor Statistics recorded a podcast promoting Project 2025 in front of a picture of a Nazi warship? Brian Tyler Cohen flagged the podcast but missed the Bismarck. Is any reporter going to cover actual Nazis in our government? He did a whole tweet storm about this. E.J. Antoni's Bismarck poster is out of stock at Amazon right now. I guess now it's hot.
Caught on.
Too bad for other applicants for economics positions in Trump's government. Maybe they could use a swastika instead when they apply. And this won the internet, I think. FedSpeak. E.J. Antoni looks like a magician who is about to underwhelm the shit out of you.
Yeah, he does kind of look like one. He does have this sort of like old-fashioned showman look about him. Like in the Seinfeld episode, what was it? The Karamazov brothers who take the Friars Club jacket. He looks like he could have been one of those guys, only with shorter hair.
Yeah, he should be selling Dr. Antoni's Miracle Tonic.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
From the back of a wagon. And that's pretty much about the size of it. It's the worst case scenario. You literally installed a complete crackpot, incompetent, laughingstock guy who is going to feed the public these very biased, slanted numbers because, hey, You're not going to be able to get competent, qualified people who care about their reputations to be the one who took over the Bureau of Labor Statistics from the one who got fired for giving the numbers. And it was numbers that the dear leader didn't like. Nobody with a reputation to protect is going to do that. That's why fascists always wind up surrounded by this collection of incompetent clowns. You look into the background of the high command of the Nazi Party, the people who surrounded Hitler, other than Goering, they were all losers. They were all losers. They were all failures. They were all laughing stocks. They were all social misfits. Because those are the people who are going to be attracted to working under something like that and doing what they're told to do by somebody like that. People who actually have a reputation to protect, they're not going to take that job. This guy's a laughing stock in the industry. He's a laughing stock among economists. That's the only kind of person who's going to agree to do this. He doesn't have a reputation to compromise.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And that's why, yes, a lot of these cabinets just get fleshed out with just absolute clowns from top to bottom. That's what this cabinet is, Trump's cabinet, from top to bottom, just one joke after another. But the good news is you're going to have a very good August jobs report. You're going to have 11,000 million billion
It's going to be the biggest jobs report ever
were created in the month of August. So you can all look forward to that. All right. Let's take a quick pause, folks, here to share with you our latest dissident sponsor. This is a great little YouTube series here called The Grifter's Bible. And actually, it's a novel in YouTube series form. So The Grifter's Bible is a mind-bending novel by El Shabooms and is now a weekly free series on YouTube with a soundtrack by Monumental Sonic Architecture. So follow the First Electric Church of Jesus Christ as they combine the bleeding edge of black patented neuroscience with the state-of-the-art in Michigas to beat the Great Recession. They sell visions of God to the huddled masses of Deep Ellum, Texas, and the money pours in until the local competition, the police, and the U.S. Navy decide to put a stop to it. There's ass whoopings, car chases, and a showdown at high noon on Good Friday in Dodge City. It's sci-fi noir. It's a picaresque thriller. It's a Western from 10 minutes in the future. It's The Grifter's Bible. It's a film series by El Shabooms with a soundtrack by Monumental Sonic Architecture. A new episode is posted every Monday at youtube.com/@Shabooms. So please go and subscribe to the YouTube channel. New episode every Monday. Please go and check that out and support our dissident artists and sponsor partners. All righty. Let's go to the Rumble rants here. It's Vito P. Says the homeless will get an all expenses paid vacation in the Everglades. Yes, cancer sucks. You guys rock. Thank you, Vito. Eric Rousseau says, release the Juan Epstein files. It's a Puerto Rican conspiracy. Blame Los Hamas. There you go. Thank you, Eric Rousseau. You don't even have to build new homes for the homeless, says Raven Laz. There are plenty of vacant properties on the market. If anything, do the Carlin idea of eminent domain and golf courses. Yes, to build new housing. Yes, that was a great bit. Raven Laz says, Jimmy did a segment a couple years back on Finland's program fighting homelessness. They helped them get off drugs, give them a place to live and a phone, and help them find a job. 80% success rate. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Other countries actually take seriously the project of rehabilitating people, making them productive members of society again. In America, we find it more worthwhile to keep the homeless in a state of misery to scare the shit out of the working class. Right. So that because the less they end up like them. I think that was another Carlin bit, that the poor are there to scare the shit out of the middle class.
The working class is there to scare the shit out of the PMCs.
Right, exactly. Right. What do we got there? Pete reminds you of Newsom, says Katrina Greshner. Maybe not as slimy yet, but he's getting there. Oh, no, he's worse. Pete Buttigieg, I think, is worse than Newsom. Yeah, I think so.
I agree.
Yeah, that is not that is not a clash of the Titans there in terms of integrity, but he's worse.
Like Gavin Newsom is a slime ball. Pete Buttigieg is a golem.
Right.
He is a soulless thing made of clay.
Right. Who was artificially elevated. And because he was artificially elevated, he met with Schumer and Pelosi in 2018. That was the Stop Bernie meeting where Pelosi and Schumer, they wanted a candidate who could siphon young votes away from Bernie, especially in the first two states, Iowa and New Hampshire, the white states, which he did. He kept Bernie's margins kind of low in those first couple of states. So, he was completely handpicked. Newsom is a slime bag, but he's talented at being a slimy politician, and that's where he's gotten. That's how he's gotten as far as he has.
Well, and he's a human slime bag.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Buttigieg is not human. He's like an AI that was created by McKinsey.
Yeah, exactly. The video that we're going to show in the segment actually kind of looks like AI. I'll make that joke in the segment. His best bet is just to claim that was AI. Just deny he said it.
Wasn't me.
Wasn't me. That was AI.
Wasn't me.
That was AI. That wasn't me. That was not me. Let's see. Dan Kelly says, is there more money to be made by putting the homeless in privatized prisons or housing them? My bet is they go where the money is to be made. Well, of course, it costs a lot more money to jail people than it does to house them. And so, who benefits from that? Of course, it's the private jails. Race Car says, Geek Note, to save money on AI, sign up for a developer account to prepay tokens. No monthly fee, only pay for what you use. Have to be smart and only use premium models when needed. But for me, tokens cost $10 a month. Interesting. Thanks, Race Car. Appreciate that. Hit 'em far says, is motive of Army in DC to guard Trump from removal? I don't think so. I think it's an exercise of the kind of power that they want to spread far and wide to, start filling federal prisons with, the homeless, with the undesirables, because he can only do this for 30 days at a time, and apparently they're only planning on doing it for 30 days at a time. Like I said, it'll be a traveling road show at first. Foopy Lee, thanks for the $4 super sticker. Appreciate that very much. Okay, all right, we're going to move right on along. All right, folks, this is somewhat of an inspiring story here. Shama Sawant, our friend, actually mentioned this episode to us when we interviewed her on Sunday's show. She referenced the Wisconsin town hall where people stood up and shouted down a pro-Israel congressman. And yeah, it is pretty cathartic to watch. Khaleesi tweets out, Wisconsin town hall erupts against Republican Representative Brian Stile due to his support for Israel's genocide of Gaza. He's booed off stage and had to end the event. $130,000 was his price to sell his soul to AIPAC. Americans are finally waking up. Let's take a look.
Free speech. What do you have to say about that, Brian Stein?
I have to say, shut up.
2 million people.
Hey, shut up.
Do you have a heart? Do you have a heart? Show us your heart.
All right, we're a little bit over. I'm told we can take one more. So Nancy Frank from Elkhorn.
Bring us home, Nancy.
I want to have you address the question that was shouted about the starving children in Gaza, but also the hungry.
Good for her. So they shut him up, and she's like, actually, no, I want you to answer his question.
Let the woman get a question.
But also the hungry children in Wisconsin due to SNAP and food bank cuts.
To the first question that you asked, which relates to the challenges that we've seen between Hamas and Israel. To me, the easy answer to address this crisis is for Hamas to surrender and release the hostages. That ends the war tomorrow. Israel was unfairly, unjustly attacked. Their civilians were killed and kidnapped by Hamas terrorists. Israel has a right to defend itself.
And it just doesn't work to say they have a right to defend themselves when they're starving children. Like that, this whole blockade of aid thing is really what did it. Because as long as it was just the bombings, Israel could make the excuse, well, it's a densely populated area. What are you going to do? And apparently there are enough idiots in America who will shrug their shoulders. What are you going to do? But to deny an entire population, half of which are children, food, that's just too much for people to take. It's too obvious. How absurd do you sound saying they have a right to defend themselves when the question is about starving kids? Like, how insane and craven do you sound saying that? To the point where anybody with two brain cells to rub together can see you for what you are when you say a thing like that. And that's why that did not work. Did not work at all. There's more.
Please let her hear her answer.
I never knew Ukraine.
The gentlewoman has the right to hear the answer.
It's genocide. You believe in genocide? Genocide. Help us out. Do something about it.
We may disagree with this, and that's fine.
No, it's not fine. No, it's actually not fine to disagree about genocide. No, it's actually not fine. Not fine at all.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for coming tonight. So we're going to close it off here because there's no point in continuing.
I thought you were running over time. I guess you weren't. I guess that was your excuse, and now you say there's no point in continuing.
I just, as it relates to your question, I'm of the view that Israel has the right to defend itself, and the easy and simplest way to end this horrific war is for Hamas to surrender and release their hostages. I appreciate everybody coming out tonight. Doesn't mean that everyone fully agrees with me. I know there's a lot of people who agree with me. I thank you down here as well, and look forward to seeing everybody again soon. Everybody have an absolutely wonderful night. Feed the kids!
Horrible.
I'm going to make sure my mic's
Horrible
said that the people are revolting.
You said it. They stink on ice.
That's right. That's right. That was pretty rough stuff. And of course, AIPAC tracker with the receipt, 130,000 from AIPAC to Brian Style. Imagine being that low a person that you can go up there and say they have a right to defend themselves, which in this context, he means they have a right to starve kids.
Right.
$100,000. Imagine, this is what I mean. Like, these people are not normal. Like, would anybody in the chat take $130,000 to defend starving kids to death? Like, there's something wrong with people. There really is.
Well, it's part of the conundrum of power. People who seek it tend not to be qualified to hold it.
Right. And not qualified to do anything else. That's why politicians are such mediocre people. How are these people representing? How do these people get so far? They're so mediocre. Well, because if you're actually good at something useful, you go and do that, right? like if you're actually good
there are a lot of conservatives who would agree with you on that. That's core to their argument against government.
Yeah, well, and what's the saying? They prove it every time they get the chance, right? When they get elected, right? People who are just not good at anything else tend to do this. Like, if you're a brilliant person who, if you're a brilliant thinker, you can make money writing books. You don't have to run for office. Chris Hedges doesn't have to run for office because he's smart enough to make a living as a public intellectual. These are the most mediocre people you'll ever meet, one after the other. U.S. represents why when say, don't you like, isn't there anyone in government you like? Well, no, there's not. No, there's not, because they're all there because they're mediocre people.
Those who can't do podcasts. Those who can't podcast run for office.
Yeah, right, exactly, yes. So here's an interesting write-up by Wisconsin Public Radio. So there's a couple things that are interesting about this. Number one, what we see is that viral clip about Gaza was not the only thing that people raised hell over. The other interesting thing about this, and this is an indictment of Wisconsin Public Radio, nowhere in this article is protest of the genocide even mentioned. They do not mention the fact that people were outraged about Gaza in this article. Republican U.S. Representative Brian Style was met by a hostile crowd attempting to shout him down Thursday evening during his first town hall gathering since the passage of President Donald Trump's Big Beautiful Bill Act. The Elkhorn High School auditorium was filled with around 200 people, some of whom carried signs with slogans like "Resist," "God is King, no others," "Hands off SSI and Medicare." When he entered the stage, Style was met by a roar of boos mixed with some cheers from smaller groups of his supporters, as we did kind of hear in the video. The town hall was raucous as the audience repeatedly overpowered Styles' microphone. He paused often while urging the crowd to stay civil and allowing him to answer a series of questions out of respect to those who asked them. The questions touched on a wide range of issues, from federal funding for cancer research, Trump's broad-ranging tariffs being enacted without congressional approval, and immigration arrests by masked ICE agents disappearing people. One attendee questioned the morality of deportation raids during Trump's second term. What I see happening to our immigrant population embarrasses me, horrifies me, and you have not raised your voice to complain about it, she told Style. I see no leadership. I see following Trump 100% of the time. In response, Style lauded Trump's executive orders and deportations. What I see as moral hazard was created by former President Biden by allowing the U.S.-Mexico border to remain unsecure, Style said. He was drowned out by a roar of boos that lasted roughly 10 seconds. I think we need to secure the U.S.-Mexico border, Style continued after the crowd quieted. You may not. It's fine that we disagree. See, that's a very sleazy way of framing the issue, and this is what we've said over and over again vis-a-vis ICE and the deportation and border security. Most people want a secure border. So if that's all Donald Trump was doing, you wouldn't have this kind of backlash. The reason you're getting this backlash is because, as the protester or as the questioner said, they're uncomfortable with masked agents disappearing people off the streets. That's not border security. That's an authoritarian police state. Those are very different. And so the fact that he answered with, well, I guess you don't want a secure border, that's a complete straw manning of the argument, which is why now they're underwater on this issue as well. After the town hall concluded and the audience filed to their vehicles, a homemade No King sign was left hanging on the entrance to the Elkhorn High School auditorium. Style represents one of just 2 competitive congressional districts in Washington, though he has won previous races comfortably and currently has a large fundraising advantage in the early stages of this campaign cycle. So yes, he represents the 1st district of Wisconsin, which is southeastern Wisconsin, which was Paul Ryan's district, oddly enough, although it has been redrawn since then because there was a census in between, so it doesn't look exactly the way it did when Paul Ryan represented it. But yeah, he won it in 2024 by about 11 points. And, this is the kind of district where we said, we covered, there was a congressional representative from Nebraska who we covered a couple shows back, who got shouted down about healthcare and Medicaid cuts. He was up by 20. So is he unseatable? Probably not. This guy is. I mean, if you're only up by 11 points going in and you see that kind of reaction combined with the trends that we're likely to see in the generic ballot looking the way it looks, and the fact that this has kind of been a swing district, the 1st district of Wisconsin, the southeastern part of the state, went for Obama pretty handily twice, and then it's gone narrowly for Trump ever since. These are the kinds of places that swung Trump's way in 2016. This is the story of the disaffected white working class Rust Belters who were former Democrats who switched to Trump. If that town hall is any indication, you have to think that that seat is vulnerable, and that video went far and wide because it is a sign that people are waking up to the brutality and the horror of what's going on. Yes, in Gaza, of course, most importantly, but also, the fact that they're getting shouted down over this immigration stuff is a real sign. And this is another reason, by the way, why they're pulling this shit in DC, because people are upset. People are quite upset. And I think the only reason why you're not seeing a massive sea change in the Democrats' favor is because people hate the Democrats too, right? And so the polling is moving kind of slower than public sentiment because people are like, oh my God, am I really going to have to vote for these fucking Democrats? They are moving in that direction slower than they would if the Democrats weren't filled with Pete Buttigieg types who we're going to see next.
Well, Karl Rove really brought the Fox News business model to politics. He was the first strategist to really argue you're better off just feeding red meat to a fanatical base than to try to broaden that base.
Right.
And now we're really a generation on from that. And this is the result. They're not trying to talk to anybody.
No.
They're just trying to get the people who are with them, no matter what, ride or die Trumpers,
right,
and just feed them the kind of red meat that appeals to them. We're beating up homeless people, immigrants, people who aren't like you, and hey, it's all going to pay off in the end. Now, that's the tricky part of this, is why you're seeing these kinds of numbers and these kinds of demonstrations. People can see their grocery bill. People aren't stupid. They understand that these tariffs are going to wind up costing them money. You have very, very, very indoctrinated people who, honestly, I don't want to stereotype. It's not everybody. A lot of these people you see online, and it really is online more than it is in real life, pumping this up, they don't have to worry about tariffs. They live in their mom's basement. Like, a lot of these people literally don't have these kinds of economic concerns because they're not fully fledged functioning adults in society. It's a lot of broken men go, blah, 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 blah. You go out into the real world, it looks like this.
Well, yes.
These are real people.
Yes. Having responsibilities does change the way you look at these kinds of things.
Sure, of course. Well, that's why they always say, well, you'll change your mind when you pay taxes. And you could change your mind and go in one direction, like, yeah, nah, man, that Mad Max looks like a manual to me. I want to see that. Let's just get rid of all the taxes, everyone for themselves. You could go in why does someone in my class pay this much and somebody in that class pays so little? But yeah, you're definitely going to think about things differently.
And why don't I get anything for the taxes either?
Right. And why don't I get more?
Why
don't
I get health care for this? Yeah.
Sure. The first time you get a paycheck, it does change the way you look at things. I literally remember that the first time I got a paycheck and seeing how much they took out in taxes, because it wasn't literally my first paycheck, but my first paycheck as someone who had to pay rent.
Right.
And then you start thinking about that. That's what I mean. Like, even if you're working and living in your parents' house, it's not the same. It's not the same as when you got to pay rent. I lived on chocolate bars to assuage my hunger pains for a while. You go through that, yeah, man, you can go in one of two directions. Like, a lot of people who come up from under like that, like an Oprah, they actually become very right wing. And, to us, Oprah is right wing. Yeah, you just have to believe in it. It's this weird liberal class version of right wing. It's like their version of prosperity gospel. Kind of a right wing thinking. Because deep down, the way they look at it is, I did it. Why can't you?
Right.
A lot of times that, like, they hate their own class or the class they came from more than anybody very often. But, the other way you can go when you see that is, why is the system like this?
Of course. All right. We got Alexander Wilson. Thanks for the $10. As a DC native, the juvenile crime rate went crazy bad, but you know what collaborates and drives high juvenile crime? High truancy rates in public school. I wish people would talk about the truancy problem. Interesting. Thank you, Alexander. Dea Ko, thanks for the $5. Don't forget, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, Singapore have very low rates of homelessness due to their social safety nets, not just Europe. That is true. Artie Blarty Fart Blast, thanks for the super sticker. Chris McElroy, thanks for the $8.99. And Chris McElroy again says, moving to New Zealand is easy. Peter Thiel was given citizenship in a week. Yes, if you got money, they'll take you. That's what I hear about New Zealand, and he definitely has money. All right. Let's see here. We got coming up tomorrow, folks, at 8 p.m. Eastern, the Misty Winston Show is back with special guest Craig Pasta Jardula. Our friend Pasta is going to be on with Misty tomorrow. They'll be discussing ICE acquiring advanced iris biometric scanning technology from BI Squared Technologies. Israel's killing more journalists, as we've covered on the show. The annual debate over school supplies, the Trump-Putin summits, and whatever pops up between now and then. So make sure you're following us over on Rumble. That is live at 8 p.m. Eastern on Rumble and X exclusively tomorrow evening. All right. Ravid Laz says, definitely be sure to visit Nick Cruz while you guys are down there in Missouri. Yeah, I mentioned we were going. Well, he's on the other side of Missouri. He's in Kansas City. He'd have to make the trek across the state, which, I mean, yeah, that'd be fun. Be fun to hang out with Nick if he wants to make the journey across.
Oh, yeah, he should, man.
It's about like 3 hours. But yeah, I think he could probably do that. And he mentioned he might be able to. I'll have to give him the dates. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That would be fun. We're going to be so busy with pizza and barbecue and friends, we're going to forget to do the movie. I live in Magaville, says Vito, 60 miles south of St. Louis. Oh, okay. So you're south of St. Louis, but not necessarily the southern part of the state. Well, that's kind of like a little below half.
Close to it.
You're close to it because St. Louis is like, what is it, halfway down? It's right in the Illinois border. Eric Rousseau, I would ask if they have a MAGA Republican running the deep state. Yes, Mark Pugliese. He might have the Bismarck because he's a naval history buff. It was a notable ship. Thank you.
Are you saying there aren't any notable ships that were not Nazi ships?
Yeah, it's a very Darryl Cooper answer. It was a notable ship.
It was a notable ship.
It's a notable ship. It was just a notable ship. That's all.
It was just it's a very misunderstood ship.
Yeah. Yeah. Washington, D.C. is Hollywood for ugly people. Yes, indeed. Who originated that quote? Politics is showbiz for ugly people. I know Roger Stone says that. Roger Stone says that all the time, but I don't think it's his. If it is, I apologize, but I don't think it is. It could be. I'm pretty sure he's quoting somebody else when he says that. But anyway, it is true. It is certainly true. All right, let's move right on along. Mayo Pete.
Mayo Pete. The man so white he makes mayonnaise look like salsa.
Yeah.
So he went on Pod Save America, and this clip, they clipped this themselves. They knew what they had, God bless them.
Yeah.
This is Mayo Pete on the subject of Israel, sporting a beard. He's going for that Commander Riker look now.
I think he's going for the Mamdani look.
Senate Democrats just voted to.
This is it. I hear beards are in, so I grew one.
It's working for that guy who articulates actual policy positions. So maybe if I grow a beard, I don't have to articulate any policy positions. I'm hoping it's the beard. It's the beard.
More than half of Senate Democrats just voted to oppose the sale of over $500 million worth of U.S. bombs and guns to Israel. Would you have voted to oppose sending those weapons?
I think we need to insist that if American taxpayer funding is going to weaponry that is going to Israel, that is not going to things that shock the conscience. And look, we see images every day that shock the conscience. So much of this is complicated. But what's not complicated is that if a child is starving because of a choice made by a government, that is unconscionable. And
well, actually, none of it's complicated.
I think especially including voices who care about Israel, who believe in Israel's right to exist, who have stood with Israel in response to the unbelievable cruelty and terrorism of October 7th. I think there's a reason why so many of those voices are speaking up now, too. Because this is not just something that is on its face and in itself a moral catastrophe. It is also a catastrophe for Israel for the long run.
How do you think the next administration should handle our relationship with Israel? Do you think it?
Yeah, that's the old thing with Israel. It's complicated.
Right.
It's complicated. He, as you would expect from a McKinsey alumni and a CIA cutout, he just hits all the buttons. He just hits all the talking points. He's on every side. Yes, I'm a moral person. But of course, October 7th, it shocked the conscience. I'm not particularly shocked by 76 years of brutality, the Nakba, occupation, refusal to honor the right of return that the UN had established going all the way back to 1948. I'm not shocked about all that. But October 7th, that's over the line.
It should change based on what Netanyahu has done the last several years?
Well, certainly Netanyahu can't be the only voice or the only compass for what should happen in the U.S.-Israel relationship. And no matter how strongly, or especially because of how strongly you might believe in Israel's right to exist and defend itself, you don't have to make excuses for the choices that Netanyahu is making, especially because they are often made not only in the name of the Israeli people, but in the name of a U.S. alliance. I think that we, as Israel's strongest ally and friend, you put your arm around your friend when there's something like this going on and talk about what we're prepared to do together. And
yeah, that, sorry,
I'm not talking about gay shit here.
Yeah. No, that is the most infuriating part of this, is the whole analogy, you put your arm around your friend. I don't know about you. My friends don't starve tens of thousands of kids. I mean, maybe your friends do. Mine don't. I remember when Kucinich was on Jimmy's show, when you were sitting there, he said something. Yeah, Israel is our friend, but they're not. No, they're not our friend. They're not my friend.
Right.
They're not my friend. You don't speak for me. How could you call them a friend at this point, unless you are a completely soulless maniac, which he is? And to the point, this looks like AI. He should just claim this is AI. It kind of looks like an AI video because of the lighting and the way the light hits his face. He should just, if he's smart, he should claim he never appeared on Pod Save America, and how dare they use this AI rendering as a pass off for an actual interview.
Well, if you remember, I can't remember what it was. It was what, did we lose a bet with the audience or something, and we had to watch that Buttigieg documentary?
Oh no, we used it as a fundraising ploy. We said,
we hit the number. Yeah. It wasn't that we lost a bet. It seems like something you do if you lost a bet. But we promised a segment on the Buttigieg documentary, and very often it's the side stuff that tells you everything. That clip with him and Chasten, where Chasten is kind of trying to get his attention. They're eating at like a diner or something.
Yeah.
And he's just eating in the creepiest, weirdest, most sociopathic way. And you just feel really bad for Chasten, because you could see this relationship is very subtextually abusive in ways that would be crazy making, because you couldn't quite put your finger on what it was.
Right.
Because what it is your boyfriend has no soul.
Right.
That's what it is. And it's very hard to nail that down. Like what that is, that this guy is just a cipher. There's just nothing there. As far as the Israel as a friend, and that's what you see, and this is part of what's so creepy about Buttigieg. It's like you programmed into an algorithm what are the talking points you're supposed to have on this subject that make liberals feel like they're on the moral side by siding with you, without actually threatening any entrenched interests or pissing off any of the money people that pay me to act as an avatar for their interests. And that's all he ever does. That's all. It's very Obama-esque. It's not an accident that he looks to Obama as kind of a model for how to present himself. He does it very badly. He can't pull it off, but it's very Obama-esque. He tries to find every side of every issue without actually saying anything about it.
Right.
There's something like this going on, and talk about what we're prepared to do together. And it certainly cannot be what we see right now from this administration and this president talking about beachfront property in Gaza before he's prepared to talk about human suffering in Gaza.
Do you think it's time to recognize a Palestinian state?
I think that's a profound question that arouses a lot of the biggest problems that have happened with Israel's survival, Israel's right to survival in the diplomatic scene. And many of the people who have taken that step historically have done so for different reasons than what we see happening with European countries.
It's a complicated issue.
Yeah.
A lot of people have said a lot of different things about that. Yeah, it's like Obama if you just stripped all the soul out of the man.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, look, say what you will about him. He could sell a line like that and make people come away feeling like he said something.
Of course.
Buttigieg cannot. It's like ridiculous. He's virtually saying there is land in the Middle East and people disagree about it.
Right. Right. Well, and if you notice, a minute earlier, he tried to blame this all on this administration, as if you were not part of the administration prior, which let this happen for over a year. You could have nipped this in the bud. This is Trump's genocide now. I agree with that. I mean, he oversees it now. He funds it. He champions it.
Now.
He owns it. I'm not saying he don't own it, but I'm saying that you could have nipped this in the bud before it got into his hands.
Yes.
I think we need to step back and we need to do whatever it takes to ensure that there is a real two-state solution and that no one, not even the likes of Netanyahu, can veto the international community's commitment to a two-state solution where you have Palestinians and Israelis living with safety, with security, with rights. I believe that can happen, but we have to actually show some commitment to it.
Yeah, actually, history shows us that absolutely cannot happen unless you dismantle the apartheid state of Israel. As long as Israel is premised on the idea of, let's face it, biblical rights to that land and the need to preserve it as a Jewish ethno-state, whatever Jewish ethnicity means, clearly that's the vision. As long as you have that, they're always going to be a threat to the Palestinians. They're all because when you are driven with that kind of messianic idea of your rights, well, nobody has rights that supersede those rights. You're seeing how they're normalizing the idea that the West Bank actually belongs to them. To get around the question of the illegal settlement, Judea and Samaria, they're all on the same talking point now. And I've talked to Zionists. They're on the same page. I've asked, like, what about the West Bank? You can't steal land that belongs to you.
Right. So So if that's their understanding of things, then what state are you talking about?
What state are you talking about? Yeah, like the idea that you have to inherently accept the Israeli formulation that the Palestinians are the obstacle to the two states and not the existence of Israel itself.
Right. Now, I think it's important to add in a conversation like this, that's not to say that countries should not recognize a Palestinian state.
Sure.
That is a very important step to a permanent solution, because you have to enshrine them with a state in order to give them the kind of negotiating power that they need. Right.
Sure.
So I'm not saying this is not to poo-poo the countries who recognize statehood.
Yeah. No.
Right. But when you take a big picture view of things, you cannot trust the Israelis to implement and abide by a two-state solution. They have proven they are not willing or able to do any such thing.
Netanyahu has said repeatedly that he doesn't support the idea of a two-state solution. Yeah, that is one more example of Buttigieg. It's really, at this point, AI is pretty much sophisticated enough that if you just put in these talking points and told it to go do an interview about Israel, you could get an AI to approximate this, because that's all this is. Up until Trump, everyone said they supported the two-state solution, Republicans included. It's the easy way out of the question. It's the easy way not to really take a position on it. Of course. On the one, I'm for everybody. I want to see everybody live there in peace. Even though, look, most of these people are not so stupid that they don't understand what we just said, that Israel is never going to allow a state to be there. So this got pretty ratioed. 1.1 thousand likes, 1.4 thousand comments. Now remember, this I took this off Pod Save America's own feed. So they've mostly got libs responding. And I got to say, this was not selective. This is very typical of the response. It was almost overwhelmingly negative. And you could tell from the way they framed it that they're mostly Democrat libs. He just lost my vote. There you go. He had this person's vote in the first place. It's Ryan Grimaldi. Danny B. disqualifies him to run for POTUS, in my humble opinion, and millions others. We're at the point that if they don't have the courage to say the truth and what needs to be said, they are compromised. And y'all didn't push back either, just letting the propaganda flow free. Clearly, these are Democrats, the way that they're framed. The idea that Pete Buttigieg is someone you would vote for under any circumstances. BIPOC Chopra. Public opinion on Israel is tanking. People like Buttigieg are desperately searching for a message that works for both regular people and wealthy Zionists. Sadly, that's impossible. You can't acknowledge the horror of genocide and then turn around and call the culprits your friends. Yes, and that's exactly what he's trying to do. That was a great summary of that entire interview. And of course, you know, when you scratch some kind of word salad gobbledygook about Israel, you're likely to find AIPAC money bleeding. 191,215. Now that might seem low, but they don't give you money when you're the transportation secretary. He was in office very short amount of time. If he had stayed in office all this time, those numbers would be a lot higher, right? So he was just the freaking mayor of South Bend, this guy.
Well, it's amazing how many people think he's like a viable national candidate when he clearly is not, for reasons we are going to find out.
He was the mayor of South Bend.
Well, he has zero black support. You cannot win a Democratic primary with zero black support, period.
Yeah. Well, that tells you everything you need to know about the Democratic Party. So this also from AIPAC Tracker. Good on them for pointing this out. It's not just Netanyahu. And this quoting from an article, poll after poll shows the most extreme and genocidal policies of the Netanyahu government are not only popular in Israel, but in key ways to the left of Israeli society. We've seen again and again in polling, you have 82% of Israelis want Gaza ethnically cleansed. So no, and very often Netanyahu is trying to negotiate a position that's to the left of his party. That guy does not even represent the far extreme right wing of Israelis. There is no such thing, as Ilan Pappé said, as a liberal Israeli. The project is inherently illiberal. You cannot be a liberal who believes in Zionism. Those two things, it's like saying you're a liberal Nazi. You can't be a liberal Nazi. You have to either abandon the premise of this project, or you have to take up a shade of right-wing positioning on it. It's just a question of how far you want to go in supporting apartheid. Are you willing to support it at the cost of genocide? For the majority of Israelis thus far, the answer is yes. The answer is yes. So no, it's not about Netanyahu. You cannot keep saying this is the only democracy in the Middle East and then write off Netanyahu as an aberration. He's been in Israeli politics for over 20 years. So if it's a democracy, clearly he represents a good portion of the Israeli public, the majority of the Israeli public. Now, there has been some polling that shows Buttigieg in the lead. A fair amount. This one is specifically without Harris in the race. And in this data for progress, he came in the lead 17%. After that's Cory Booker. This was done in April. I suspect that's because we were still in close proximity to his stunt, his filibuster stunt. And Ocasio-Cortez also coming in at 14, then Gavin Newsom at 10, and it drops off pretty sharply from there. This one includes Harris. This is more recent. This is June. And yeah, he's got the lead in that one, 16. Harris at 13, Newsom at 12, Ocasio-Cortez all the way down at 7. There's been a more recent poll from a company, I believe the name of the company is Echelon, never heard of them, where she does have a lead, 26%. And then Buttigieg is tied for second. But clearly he's in contention. Now, polls this far out are more of a test of who people have heard of than it's a test of anything else. So I wouldn't make very much out of it. But the fact that people could watch that bloodless freak and even consider voting to make him the president or think running him would be a good idea like Vance wouldn't go through him like a knife through butter. It tells you that the core Democratic Party has not learned very much from the experience of Donald Trump.
Also, one thing. Oh, sorry to break your flow, but one thing about these polls too, they have to take with a grain of salt is he's leading at 17%. As the primary calendar goes on, you're not going to be running against 12 other people anymore, where you can win with 17%. It's going to narrow down to 2 or 3 at max 4 people. At which point, the guy with no black support cannot win. Cannot win, no matter what. Yeah.
So this is an actual Democrat account to give you an idea of the brilliant minds that make up the base of the modern Democratic Party. Does anyone want chips? It's a fairly large account, not huge. I don't know how you feel, but I think Pete Buttigieg, the brilliant, articulate Navy vet who never loses his cool, would be unstoppable in 2028.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And then a few responses to this. Lerner Chris, yes. Beto is also moving back up the ladder. Ossoff is also looking good. Add Kamala and Newsom. A lot of white boys in there for this explicitly anti-racist party.
Yeah.
And we should have a great primary season. Message and organization will be the key. Everyone has already started. Debs for Dems. I think he's brilliant and would be a remarkable POTUS. The right can somehow accept Scott Bessent, but Pete's too gay. I wonder if the moderates and independents can be swayed. I want to believe his intelligence will overcome any bias. I hope so. He's what we deserve.
Who says he's too gay? I haven't heard that. People say that.
I mean, well, it's been a long thing. They want to say, speaking of the black support, that they don't like him because he's gay.
Right.
They want to say that. D.D. Watson. He's way too liberal. We need a more centrist Democrat for 2028. So these are the dregs of the liberal class that still proudly identify as Democratic voters. So I hope you like J.D. Vance, because I think you're going to be seeing a lot more of them. So going to your point, Keaton, I've been on this story for years. In fact, it was one of my earliest articles for Due Dissidence, was getting into how Pete Buttigieg's non-cancellation by Democrats makes my fucking head explode. That guy, at the height of wokeness, at the height of anti-racism, committed like 6 cancelable offenses before breakfast through the entire 2020 primary campaign season with no consequence. No consequence. This was really the moment of don't speak for black people. And he literally claimed black support from everyone who ever shook his hand who happened to be black. But nope. He doesn't get canceled. He gets elevated to transportation secretary. So this was Politico 2020. On life support, Buttigieg's struggles with black voters threatened his candidacy. So Stephen Smith just went on Bill Maher. We got to do it audio only because Bill Maher's a bitch like that. But it came up why Buttigieg has literally 0% black support.
Democratic primary voters, 16% would support Buttigieg. That's the highest of any candidate. Pete Buttigieg.
I don't believe it. I think that's just a poll number. I can't see that happening.
Well, okay, but wait. 16%. Black voters, 0. 0. You don't usually see 0 anywhere. 0's low.
For who? What is this?
Yeah, 0 is low.
Explain that. I mean, why do black voters have this? I mean, he's a nice guy.
Yeah, he's under-indexing a little bit with black voters, yeah.
A little? What is that all about?
He doesn't move us. I respect the man. I've interviewed him before. Very nice man, highly intelligent. But you gotta be able to move us, bro. He doesn't move us. You can speculate as to why that is. I'm not going there. He doesn't move us.
All right. So apparently, being honest about Pete Buttigieg is a third rail. Stephen Smith likes to go up there and act like he's a truth teller and rant and rave against the Democratic Party. But, most of these people are just sheepdogs putting on a show. And you could tell at moments like that when he has a great opportunity to lay out a very obvious case that has nothing to do with his sexuality against Pete Buttigieg. I'm not going to go there. Yeah, he's a nice guy. Come on, man. Stephen Smith doesn't know Pete Buttigieg's record. He doesn't know why, aside from his personality style, which I'll admit is, lighter than chalk, and maybe that has something to do with it. But I don't think so, man. What? Joe Biden was soulful. Joe Biden looked like he just walked out of a Motown recording session. I mean, if you talk about who moves you, and it seems like that's what he was implying, that Pete Buttigieg just doesn't speak in a way that's going to appeal to that population. Joe Biden, the author of Mass Incarceration, didn't speak that way, and all it took was James Clyburn giving the thumbs down on voting for Bernie, and he cleaned up in South Carolina. Not so with Pete Buttigieg, although he didn't get the Clyburn endorsement.
John Kerry did very well with black voters in 2004.
Right.
What? John Kerry's a soul man?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So here's the root. The root has uncovered documents, letters, and emails that outline years of discrimination against black cops in presidential candidate Pete Buttigieg's South Bend Police Department. Okay, so a lot of people might have forgotten about this. I'll tell you, if Buttigieg runs for president, I will do my part to make sure nobody forgets about it. As I said, I've been on this for as long as we've had the show. Boykins had served that's Darrell Boykins, had served as a police officer in South Bend for 27 years before he was appointed as the city's first and to date only black police chief in 2007. In 2011, after the city's police telephone recording system crashed, SBPD Communications Director Karen DePape discovered recordings of white officers allegedly using racist rhetoric and concocting a way to get rid of Boykins with the help of top donors to Buttigieg's then ongoing mayoral campaign. DePape made 5 cassette tapes of the most egregious remarks and described them in legal documents the city has had for years. One officer allegedly said, quote, "It will be a fun time when all white people are in charge." Soon after Buttigieg took office, word got out about the tapes, and the officers complained that the recordings violated the Federal Wiretap Act. Even though the recording system had been in place for more than a decade, its existence somehow became the black guy's fault. Okay, so Buttigieg famously fired him. There's a tweet about that. In 2013, Buttigieg replaced South Bend's first black police chief with a white chief with a history of civil rights complaints. Then the new chief was accused of failing to back up a black lieutenant, David Newton, responding to a report of an altercation involving a gun. Basically, he serpicoed him, tried to get him killed by not backing him up. That's who Buttigieg put in place. Got rid of the first black police chief, didn't fire any of these cops that they had on tape making racist comments about the police chief. You want to say, well, these wiretaps are illegal, which obviously that was just an excuse. But even if you want to say that, don't you want to fire the racist cops too? Don't you want to get rid of that? Oh, wow, this is a hotbed of racism. Let's hire new cops. No, you didn't do that. Buttigieg's campaign criticized for using stock photo of Kenyan woman to promote plan to address U.S. racism. Remember that one? As Ilhan Omar, this is not okay or necessary. But it gets better. Pete Buttigieg touted 3 major supporters of his Douglas plan for Black America. They were alarmed when they saw it. Quote, "I never actually endorsed the plan. They went ahead and used my name," said one prominent South Carolinian who the campaign named as a top supporter. Here's a copy of the tweet. They've since deleted this, but it's in the article. They were smart enough to screenshot it. More than 400 South Carolinians endorse Mayor Buttigieg's Douglas plan for Black America. Now, for anyone who's forgotten or never knew, what this scumbag did to fake Black support was send out an email to hundreds of South Carolina Black business leaders and community leaders and politicians with an opt-out option, where if you didn't want to be included as endorsing the plan, you had to opt out. Which obviously, how many of your emails do you ignore, particularly when it's unsolicited or right?
Yeah, no, he basically treated it like a free trial for a Kegel exercise app. You know, if you forget to cancel, then you sign up, you know?
Right, exactly. You're automatically assumed to approve his plan.
Right.
And then this one, I think we actually covered this. I think we had the show by then. Mayor Pete accused of using Black women's support as props at Iowa caucuses. Remember this one? Remember this one? Yeah,
front row.
These 4 Black women behind him. And this is Scotty Christopher Knight. This is a Democrat who likes him. I like Pete Buttigieg, but there's 4 Black people in all of Iowa. And because of his problem getting Black support since he announced his candidacy, he's got all 4 of them standing right behind him right now during his late night speech rally. And that was also the one, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Keaton, where without the results being in, he declared victory. Wasn't that the speech?
I think so. I think so, yeah. I'm pretty sure.
And going to the absurd, Buttigieg's campaign bought lunch at a Black-owned South Carolina restaurant, then called it a partnership. That partnership, as it turns out, was the exchange of money for food. $90 to be exact, to feed 8 campaign staffers and a surrogate. This was Diane's kitchen, and she had to come out and make a statement. They were pressuring her to say that she supported the campaign, and she said, I'm only going to accept that you all stopped in while you were campaigning in South Carolina, and I welcomed you all. Okay? Any one of those things. Remember, this is the height of cancel culture. This is everybody's running around with white fragility under their arm at this time. And he was able to get away with that in that cultural moment. At this moment, the Democrats are scouring people's social media feed trying to find someone to cancel. A day without a cancellation for them was like a day without sunshine. This was the height of the cancel culture terror. And here's Pete Buttigieg explicitly and repeatedly lying about Black support, speaking for Black people, right? It was one of the things one of the core tenets of anti-racism. You don't speak for groups you don't belong to. Worse than that, he's claiming political support in the slimiest ways you can imagine. He didn't get canceled, man. He got transportation secretary. This is a big part of why, even if on the merits you agree with a lot of those principles, they never adhered to those principles. That was part of what was so repulsive about it. That was obvious to anybody who wasn't all the way down the rabbit hole in their bubble, that it was just a political tactic to rule people out of bounds who they find inconvenient to their power. That's all they ever used it for. You weren't even able to get to a discussion on the merits because they so clearly were never concerned about the merits. They were concerned about the merits. They would have drummed Pete Buttigieg out of the party just on firing the first Black police chief of South Bend. He never even would have gotten the nod to go as far as he did.
Yeah, and for a McKinsey consultant who clearly just like poll tests everything he says in his brain before he says it, which explains the gobbledygook Israel answer on Pod Save America, you would think he could understand the data point 0 black support means he's not viable. So just pack it up and go home. What is he even thinking? Like the Pete Buttigieg 2028 thing, it's a non-starter. It's not a serious conversation. That's why when I make jokes about the future woke president, right, I always say President Buttigieg because I'm joking, because that's the most ridiculous and ludicrous example. He's not going to be president. You cannot win a Democratic primary without black support. I don't think you could win one without 50% black support. Like, you need at least half of the black vote to win. I can't think of a Democratic nominee who's won the nomination without that. Obviously, we know Biden won the black vote, Hillary won the black vote, Obama won the black vote. I just mentioned earlier in the segment, John Kerry won the black vote in the 2004 primary. I don't know what the numbers are on Al Gore. I'm assuming Clinton's outgoing VP. He probably won the black vote, but if he didn't, that would be the last one. That would be the last one.
Yeah, what happened to listen to black people?
Years. You cannot win without a majority of the black vote, much less 0. He's got 0. So that means there is no conversation, Pete Buttigieg as the nominee. And it's so weird that a guy who seems as data-driven as he is doesn't understand that, look, this ain't going to happen for him. Just go do something else. There's plenty of careers out there for bloodless McKinsey consultants. Being president is not in the cards for him. It's not going to happen.
He clearly thinks that one of these tricks, maybe he'll send all his staffers to every black-owned McDonald's in South Carolina and claim an endorsement from McDonald's. He clearly thinks he's going to pull some kind of slimy trick or be able to reinvent himself in a way that he's going to have a breakthrough. If you remember, I don't know if you had the pleasure, you probably did. After Clyburn told the voters of South Carolina Biden was the one they had to vote for, and they did it, MSNBC Democrats would really use that as a shield to call you a racist if you were still rejecting Joe Biden because you're not listening to black people. So why didn't that apply to Buttigieg?
Yeah.
There's a guy who has 0% support in that state where you're so admiring you're so respectful and deferential of the will of the voters in South Carolina. So why don't you entirely reject Pete Buttigieg the way they did?
Exactly. There's a big loud signal coming from there for sure that they are keen to ignore. We're at 833 likes, folks. And if you like what we do here, you can help us do more of it, of course, by becoming a member. You can go to dudissidents.com/Patreon, Substack, or Locals to make that happen. We are going to be posting lots of member-exclusive content from the road in St. Louis, so this is a good time to join up. In addition to that, you get call-in access to all of our post-show Q&As every Sunday. You also get post-game and call-in Q&A access once a month on every live stream, plus we do a monthly film club. Plus, you get ad-free versions of every live stream emailed to you the day after they air live, which means if you miss a show and you don't want to watch it back with commercial interruption, you can get it ad-free emailed directly to you. Plus, you get your name up in lights here on the show scroll. All that for just $5 a month. We could not do the trip to St. Louis without our members. Obviously, the donors help tremendously, but what gives us the ability to go on the road comes with the stability of membership. And so we thank you all very much for your support. It's hugely important to the sustainability of the project. So if you can, please sign up at dudissidents.com/Patreon. It helps us out tremendously. To that point, there was one question here. Nocturnal Human says, if you feel like answering this, what are your plans for hosting your show while you're in Missouri? Guest hosts? No, we are actually going to still do the show from the road. It will be a modified schedule. The streams will be a bit shorter since we're not going to be able to prep 6, 7, or 8 stories per show. So we'll cover
us, make things easy on ourselves.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, you got to keep the live streams kind of going, and so we will be doing them. It'll be a modified schedule, so we're still finalizing the film itinerary. Sunday show will likely be an early show, maybe even a Sunday morning show. And then Tuesday show might be a regular time. We might be doing that. I have to run it by the folks at the African People's Socialist Party, but I thought it would be a cool idea to do that show from the Uhuru Solidarity House. That might be cool. And at which point that would
Tuesday?
Yeah, that would be regular time, because that's what I have in my proposed itinerary for them. We're still finalizing. I'm pitching them an itinerary, then they'll pitch me back one, and we'll land on one. But so it will be a modified schedule. So
listen, man, Synergy. That's the show where we land the interview with Pete Buttigieg.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah,
we pitch it to him as an effort to improve his numbers with with
the black voters. That's right. That's right. So make sure you're on our Substack. Even if you join for free, it's important to be on our Substack. That's our newsletter. So even if you're on the free version, that lets you know when we're going to be live. So it will definitely be a modified schedule. We know there's no Sunday night show at 7 p.m. because there's an Uhuru rally that we're going to in the afternoon. So we're not going to be live at our normal time on Sunday. We know it'll be at a different time, likely earlier in the day. But if you join our newsletter, we send out emails a couple hours in advance of every show so you don't miss it. So go dodissidents.substack.com.
Yeah, I mean, probably will be reasonable. Try to do like 4 segments plus maybe some on the ground stuff.
Yeah, we'll do like 4 stories plus some developments from the road. If we do broadcast from the Uhuru House, we might bring on as a guest, somebody who's there.
Right.
Well, there'll be kind of a slightly different format, but we will be live for Sunday and Tuesday. And then I will be back on Thursday. Russ is staying there an extra week, but I will be back on Thursday for the regularly scheduled show. So let's see. Professor Brown note says might the charming Miss Tusker be part of the future of the expanding DD media empire? Or is the money earmarked for the DD golf course? Haha. Tusker doesn't have the ego. She doesn't want the spotlight.
Yeah. So there's not like speculation on this. Yeah, she just doesn't really want to.
Yeah.
Dude, I would give her a show in a second. Yeah. No, she doesn't want the notoriety. She doesn't want the visibility. Like she's not damaged in that way.
Right. She doesn't want the trolls coming after her. Right. She doesn't want to become Michael Tracy.
She's not interested. She's really not interested. Yeah, I mean, we she texts after shows like she's watching, but yeah, she doesn't want to be getting recognized at the Piggly Wiggly over there.
Piggly Wiggly, yeah. Is $1 enough for a magical amulet to protect me from having a peasant mind, Russell? No, it is not.
Only if that dollar buys you the works of Lenin.
Yeah, there you go. Todd says this is exactly why they are pushing so hard for the Texas redistricting fight. They're scared of losing their power next year. Yeah, well, yes, absolutely, 100%. Eric Suarez, thanks for the $5. Remember when they condemn October 7th, they're telling you no one has the right to resist occupation. Thank you, Eric, for that. Yeah, but look, my answer for that is, and this is why it's complicated in the sense that the right to resist does not include the right to attack civilians. So as an attack on civilians is a war crime. So then ask yourself, okay, who's committed more war crimes? Just look at the death count, right? I mean, it's not the same universe. Amadeus, happy belated, Russ, and Keaton, your children's names sound like privateers who scourged the slave trade. Well played. What, Beckett and Sawyer and Augie? Are those? All right. Thank you. I don't think so. I think those are literary names. Let's see here. Nocturnal Human says, if Pet shaved the sides of his mustache, who does he look like? Thank you. If Pete shaved the side of his mustache, who does he look like? I don't know. It is a pretty thick goatee. WVP says, in previous message, forgot to add and a girl. Sorry. Are you talking about Gen X girl? So Gen X girl does not work for us anymore. It was a little too fast paced, and so she thought she'd be better suited doing Twitter stuff on her own time. So you don't have to add in a girl anymore. But there's no hard feelings. It's a fast paced environment. The news business.
It's a lot of work.
News business is
a lot of work. But since it came up, we are looking to hire more people you see what we do with the slides, with the exhibits. Yeah, we need more people to do that.
Right.
And we're thinking
if you want a
now,
high
instead of
stress
trying
job
to
for
have-
very little pay, then please apply. Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's the American dream, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the American dream. Exactly.
Yes. Yes. And we're thinking like more than one person because it's probably a bit much for one person to handle.
Yeah.
So we'll probably hire multiple people. So if you're interested in doing that, basically, if you're someone who's very cued into the conversation around the kinds of stories we cover on both X and in the media, then and you know, you have basic computer skills, then it might be a good source of some extra income for you. Do dissidents at Gmail. Let us know. This is what's most important to me. Write a couple paragraphs about why you want to do it.
Right.
That's really the way to apply it. It's not the kind of thing that's really going to be on your resume, right?
Yeah,
You did something like this. Like, I'm much more interested in why you want to do it than a resume. So a couple paragraphs about you. That's what we're looking for.
Yep. Indeed. Do dissidents at gmail.com. All right. Wow. We were at 3 hours already. All right. We'll do one more. Go ahead. Australia.
Uno más. All right. Hey, so we're going to end off on a hopeful note because I find this story very hopeful because very often as an activist, that is one of the biggest problems that activists have. Burnout, out of feeling you're not really getting anywhere, frustration. But here's, I think, an inarguable example of how a protest made a very big difference in a government's policies regarding Palestine. So this was a huge protest at the famous Sydney Harbour Bridge last week.
The Harbour Bridge swamped by a tidal wave for humanity in what many believe was the biggest anti-war protest Australia has ever seen. And what a stage. For the first time, the world-famous coat hanger turned into an authorised anti-war protest deck. In a highly rare move, the bridge was closed to traffic just before lunch to allow massive crowds to march for peace in Gaza, after pro-Palestine organisers yesterday won Supreme Court backing to have their say. How does it feel walking onto the Harbour Bridge?
This is incredible, and the point is to do it with 100,000 people trying to stop a genocide. That's what we need to do. We said we need people power. We said this bridge would be a powerful symbol for that. And these images of who knows how many people are here to be beamed around the world to say we have the power to stop this genocide.
Front and centre, Julian Assange. In a rare public appearance since his release from jail. Few know better the fight for freedom of speech, alongside unfairly sacked journalist Antoinette Lattouf.
It's an issue about our democracy. Everybody needs to stand united, and they are. If you look around, they're looking proud behind us.
Can you believe you're marching over the bridge?
I can't believe that we're finally acknowledging starvation. The very thing that I got fired from 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago with the ABC.
The weather was miserable, but there was no holding back.
The occupation has to go!
This sea.
So yeah, it's winter there now. So it's pretty nasty weather, as you can see. Estimates of the crowd range between 100 and 300,000 people who came out for that. And I don't think coincidentally, within a few days, Australia to recognize Palestinian state leaves U.S. increasingly isolated among key allies. That's CNN. So here's Albanese's speech in part.
I can confirm that at the 80th session of the United Nations General Assembly in September, Australia will recognise the state of Palestine. Australia will recognise the right of the Palestinian people to a state of their own, predicated on the commitments Australia has received from the Palestinian Authority. We will work with the international community to make this right a reality. Australia is making this statement today following our Cabinet meeting as part of a coordinated global effort building momentum for a two-state solution. Over the past fortnight, I have discussed this with Prime Minister Starmer, President Macron, Prime Minister Luxon and Prime Minister Ishaba, as well as Prime Minister Netanyahu last Thursday and President Abbas last Tuesday. A two-state solution is humanity's best hope to break the cycle of violence in the Middle East and to bring an end to the conflict, suffering and starvation in Gaza.
And this from CNN. On Monday, New Zealand's Foreign Minister Winston Peters said his country was also considering recognizing a Palestinian state and would make a decision at a cabinet meeting in September. Quote, New Zealand has been clear for some time that our recognition of a Palestinian state is a matter of when, not if, Peters said in a statement, echoing the language used by Australian officials in the weeks leading up to Monday's announcement. Australia joins the UK, France, and Canada in announcing plans to recognize a Palestinian state in September. The move leaves the United States increasingly isolated from some of its closest allies in its defense of Israel's escalating military campaign that's decimated the besieged enclave after almost 2 years of war. If Wellington also moves, it will mean that 4 of the Five Eyes intelligence sharing network, comprising the US, UK, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, will recognize Palestinian statehood. Albanese said Australia had sought and received assurances from Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas that Hamas would play no role in any future Palestinian state. Other conditions include a commitment to demilitarize and to hold general elections, abolish a system of payments to the families of prisoners and martyrs, and governance and education reform, as well as, quote, international oversight to guard against the incitement of violence and hatred, Albanese said. Now, I'm just going to point out before we move on, this is part of what past supposed efforts at a Palestinian state have gotten hung up on. Because in the end, you're asking these people, well, if you want them to disarm, well, we've seen what happens in the West Bank. You've got a completely genocidal people that do nothing to their own people when they go over, steal houses, and kill Palestinians
right
where they live. Also past, you'll hear Netanyahu in his recent press conference. We're not going to play that part. But in his recent press conference, he did the whole Israeli line of how many times the Palestinians have turned down a state, all these great deals they got. These great deals, they have no military, no right to conduct their own diplomacy, no right to conduct their own trade policy. And these deals would have broken up segments of a Palestinian state without being contiguous. Like, just absolutely ridiculous. Like, it looks like a gerrymandered congressional district in the United States, the kinds of states that they've offered for them to have. So it looks like, and this whole idea, okay, so they claim that it's pay to slay to give this money to, they've got thousands of Palestinians locked up in these prisons who didn't kill anybody. That's a means of social support to give money to these people. Yeah, they're giving money to families of people who have been killed by the occupation, as they should, as any people would if they had any conscience or care for their people. All of this reflects a perspective that Israel has a moral legitimacy that it does not have. That having been said, it's a step, and this is the challenge of activism. Very often it feels like you're pushing that boulder up that hill and you just wonder when you'll get there. Eventually you do. There is no doubt in my mind that the saying that we see so often, one day everyone will have always been against this. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. There is going to come a day when people are going to discuss Israel as one of those incredible world historic crimes and one of the great mistakes and moral catastrophes of the family of nations. And there are going to be a lot of books, just like you have about the Nazis. How did people allow this? You're going to have books like that about Israel. It will happen. And our efforts are bearing fruit. And you do have to look at things like this as a triumph of the movement that we've been a part of, even if it's inadequate to meet the moment.
Decisions of the Netanyahu government, firstly, the stopping of aid that we've seen, and then the loss of life that we're seeing around those aid distribution points, where people queuing for food and water, losing their lives, it is just completely unacceptable. And we have said that. I spoke with Prime Minister Netanyahu. He again reiterated to me what he has said publicly as well, which is to be in denial about the consequences that are occurring for innocent people. There has been too many innocent lives lost, both Israelis and Palestinians, and the world is saying we need a solution to this conflict. We need to end the cycle of violence, and the way to do that is to have a two-state solution with a demilitarised Palestinian state, where Hamas, of course, have no role to play in that, and a secure Israel as a state which is recognised by the states around it.
So, the Aussies are kind of like the Canadians in that they're generally pretty nice and polite. But in Australian, as somebody married to an Australian, I can tell you what he just said is Netanyahu's a real asshole. That's if you go into the subtext, he refuses to acknowledge the reality. Netanyahu is, if you read between the lines and if you look at a lot of inside reporting, we covered this the other day. Yeah, nobody likes that guy. Nobody likes that guy. He's a repulsive psychopath that they have to deal with, but nonetheless, they're not ready to take that final step and disown Israel. You see how many equivocations he has there, even as he's using what could be interpreted as strong language about Netanyahu, relatively not nearly strong enough. Nobody likes this guy. So Netanyahu gave a very rare press conference, which shows you how much he's feeling the pressure. So we're just going to look at the relevant parts to Australia, but this was, maybe other people have clipped it now, like to see the full segment. This is a very small account, but I really had to look around to find this full segment where he talks about the two-state solution at length for about 6 minutes. So this is Lytton Drake, the account, and he has like the whole 6-minute cut. So we're just going to watch a portion of it.
Canada, France say that they will support Palestinian statehood in the next short while. You've described that as a reward for Hamas here. Other countries like Australia are also walking down this path, not quite there yet. How much of this is a reward for Hamas, and how much of it is actually countries like those who have repeatedly said Israel does have a right to defend itself, but are now struggling to stomach what they're seeing you and your military doing in Gaza?
Well, first of all, those who say that Israel has a right to defend itself are also saying, but don't exercise that right. When we do what any country would do faced with this genocidal terrorist organization that has performed the worst attack on Jews since the Holocaust, I think we're actually applying force judiciously, and they know it. They know what they would do if right next to Melbourne or right next to Sydney, you had this horrific attacks. I think you would do it, at least what we're doing, probably maybe not as efficiently and as precisely as we're doing it. We've lost quite a few soldiers in that effort.
You think you can run one of these camps? You think you can run the camps as good as we run the camps? All the prisoners are fed very well. Come to the camp. Fucking what a psycho. You probably would not do it as efficiently.
As efficiently, yeah.
As we're doing it. Wow. So in between these two clips, again, it's kind of worth watching in the whole. He goes on the whole Israeli Hasbara classic rant about how the Palestinians are the ones who don't want peace going back to the partition. Yeah. Why would a people offered 20% of their own land not like the idea?
Right.
Huh. How unreasonable.
Most of the Jewish public is against the Palestinian state for the simple reason that they know it won't bring peace, it'll bring war. To have European countries and Australia march into that rabbit hole, just like that, fall right into it, and buy this canard is disappointing.
He almost said buy this shit.
And I think it's actually shameful.
Stopped himself.
But it's not going to change our position. Again, we will not commit national suicide to get a good op-ed for 2 minutes. We won't do that.
First of all, they didn't dive into anything. It took them almost 2 years to get to this point. It's not like they made a knee-jerk decision.
But you know what? You watch this press conference, and if you talk to Zionists, this is what's funny. Like, most of these Jewish Zionists in America are very MSNBC Democrats, but very few of them will actually condemn Netanyahu. Like, when you watch this, like, this is the kind of shit they repeat. Like, they speak this language. That is why, yes, the idea of trying to separate not Netanyahu from the opinions of Zionists is absurd. You'll see they call him Bibi. Bibi's in a tough spot. He has a lot of tough decisions to make. They don't despise him. They don't repudiate him. Only people who repudiate him are Democrats looking for a way to keep taking the AIPAC money and to not get those pictures released of them that weekend that AIPAC bought them an all expenses paid trip to a junior high school.
Right.
Maintaining some kind of fake moral stance, as Buttigieg did with Pod Save America. All right. So one of the really nice things about a parliamentary system is you have more than two parties represented in Australia. So this is David Shoebridge, who is a Green Party senator from New South Wales. That is the territory that Sydney is in, talking about how inadequate this actually is in face of genocide.
Of a genocide. This is the primary statement that the Albanese government has made. And I think if you ask, when I've had contact with the Palestinian groups that I speak with regularly, including today, they have said that this fails to meet the moment. That what they want our government to do is to take every reasonable, every proportionate, every moral step they can to end the genocide. And we know what that looks like. It looks like applying the same set of sanctions that we apply to Russia for its illegal war against Israel for this illegal war. So, of course, we should be recognising a Palestinian state. We should have done that decades ago. But in the context of a genocide, this does not meet the moment. So,
yep, absolutely. Like, yeah, it's good, and we should, as activists, take the wins and appreciate the progress. That is important, because if you don't, you're no good to anyone if you burn out and you can't go on because you get so frustrated that it's inch by inch by inch that you have to fight for. But look how far we've come. You think they'd be doing that if they didn't have hundreds of thousands of people marching across the Sydney Harbor Bridge? That's what you do it for. That's what you do it for, because he's absolutely right. He's absolutely right that this is inadequate to the moment. but they're not going to get there all at once. They just aren't. You're not going to get a Western world that has been dominated and owned by AIPAC, by the Israeli lobby, and that in the best case scenario has accepted the formulation that Israel is a moral response to the horrors of the Holocaust and to not support it as anti-Semitic. That's at best. Many of them believe that. At worst, many of them are blackmailed or owned by AIPAC. You're not just going to get them from there to repudiating Israel and sanctioning it like Russia in one step. But the fact that you have 4 of the 5 Five Eyes countries now recognizing a Palestinian state and joining the majority of the world,
right.
It's really a U.S. and Western thing to not recognize a Palestinian state. It's important progress.
Yes, and the other thing that I think is important to keep in mind, speaking of Tusker, she said this a while back since somebody brought her up. Ultimately, this is going to be the Palestinians' deal to negotiate, right? Like ultimately, no one is going to be able to, nor should they, jump out in front of them and tell them what they ought to accept or ought not to accept. Greenwald said a similar thing to us when we interviewed him back in December 2023, when we asked him about the right of return. And to be completely honest and fair, to not misquote him, I don't want to recite what he said, but a part of his answer was essentially what you just said, which is that you have to, when you're talking about any sort of deal or any sort of agreement or settlement, you are forced to reckon with what is possible step by step. In other words, you can't jump 10 steps ahead of what is actually geopolitically possible. Doesn't mean you can't advocate for that and push for that. We should, obviously, you do that. But you can't go and say, well, no, the Palestinians should turn this down. It's not your deal to make, number one. It's theirs. And number two, you have to keep in mind, when you're going step by step, as you are forced to in this realm, you have to be able to deal in what is possible. That's just the reality. And so, yeah, as insufficient as this is, it is a necessary step because that's the only way this progress will happen. It will not happen any other way. So there's going to be a UN General Assembly meeting in 6 weeks in New York City. It's going to be very interesting to see how many countries at that point, because we already see a lot of countries say they're going to, will recognize a Palestinian state. And ultimately, the larger context of all of this is a world in which countries that do not recognize a Palestinian state, I believe, will become less and less relevant and less powerful on the world stage. And that is the big picture game here, because ultimately, this has to happen through global diplomacy. Israel has a Samson option. You don't think these fucking people are crazy enough to take the whole world with them? If so ultimately, the only choice is to do it step by step by step. And it's very painful, and there's a great cost to that. As Gabor Mate said, we have to reckon with the fact that we have not saved a single finger on a single Palestinian child. That's just true. At the same time, that doesn't mean you give up. It also doesn't mean that you can jump into the negotiations for the Palestinians because they're dealing with what's possible. They have to. They have no choice. They have no choice. And if they have no choice, that means we all have no choice. And so, yeah. That is, of course, a mixed bag at best. But when we see these countries gather in 6 weeks at the UN, I think coming out of that, I hope coming out of that, the whole conversation is very, very different. And the dynamics on the world stage are very, very different. All right. Brendan McNamara says it's a watershed moment. Statements are imperfect, but coming from pure blind Zionism to this is a win, they're open to being taught the truth now. Yep, I agree.
Where now that I didn't want it in the segment, I am going to look into, because I have a New York press pass, I'm going to look into covering that live on the floor. I'm going to see what's involved.
Yeah, that would be amazing. That would be amazing, because that is a potentially historic General Assembly. Amadeus says, frankly, I don't believe the Five Eyes are actually supporting Palestine, since they still give Israel weapons. Well, that is true. They still do.
Well, that's what Shoebridge was saying there. Like, they should be sanctioned. Why aren't they sanctioned?
Right. Exactly. Sparky, thanks for the $10. Landlocked Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali all have an alliance. Shouldn't the Ivory Coast make a deal with them for their access to the sea before Ghana beats them to it? They can sell gold for the Golden Dome. Thank you, Sparky. Appreciate that. Xander Varkov, Buttigieg learned recently that conscience wasn't actually just a phrase used by Maha, but a word, that thing that people have that he couldn't quite figure out. Yes, exactly. Hillary Hinton, the black women were more prominent on that Iowa caucus stage than the Beatles were at Sgt. Pepper. Sgt. Pepper cover. Fucking awesome. Thank you. So Tusker is a sane, grounded person. Figures, typical women. Oh, well, here's $1 for the golf course. Name the 19th after me. Yeah, you got it.
I mean, honestly, you got to be that kind of person,
right?
Because a lot of shit comes with it. That unless you have that drive, you're just not gonna like.
Sorry, hold on. I gotta reload this. YouTube Studio conked out. Okay, here it is. Okay, we're back. Where are we here? Amadeus, I would hazard a guess that NATO only recognizes Palestine because they're hoping Israel will kill them all, but will just give them enough credibility to say, we tried. Sparky says, long live Ibrahim Traore, F. Macron, and the French neocolonial empire. Thank you, Sparky. Appreciate the super chats, everybody, and the Rumble rants. All right, that looks like our show. We appreciate you all being here very much. We thank the YouTubers and the Rumblers. Smash that like button on the way out. Smash that subscribe button on YouTube and that follow button over on Rumble. We want to thank our guests, Leonard Goodman and Penny Hess, for joining. Misty Winston's show is tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern, and then we are back here at noon on Thursday, the 14th. Until then, thanks very much for spending the afternoon with us. Appreciate you all. As always, be safe and be well.
Courage!
Please clap.